The night my father sold me to pay his debts, I learned that love was just another word for transaction. Lena Hart's world shattered in 60 seconds. The time it took her father to sign away her freedom to Adrian Voss, the most dangerous man in the city. One signature, one handshake, one life destroyed. But what began as betrayal would become something far more complex. A twisted dance between power and survival, control and choice, darkness and an unexpected light. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey reaches. The crystal chandelier above the dining table cast fractured light across the polished mahogany, each shard of illumination sharp enough to cut. Lena Hart sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, fingers pressed together so tightly the knuckles had gone white. Across from her, Richard Hart, her father, swirled bourbon in a cut-glass tumbler, the amber liquid catching the light like liquid gold. He hadn't looked at her once in the past 20 minutes. That should have been her first warning. "You're 23 years old, Lena." His voice carried that particular timbre of false affection he always used when he wanted something. "Old enough to understand how the world works." Lena's stomach tightened. She'd heard this tone before, right before he'd withdrawn her college fund to invest in a sure thing that had evaporated like morning mist. Right before he'd sold her mother's jewelry collection, the only tangible memories Lena had left of the woman who died when she was 12. "I understand perfectly well," she said quietly, keeping her voice measured. Years of navigating her father's moods had taught her that emotion was a weakness he'd exploit without hesitation. Richard finally met her eyes, and what she saw there made her blood run cold. Not anger, not frustration. Something worse, calculation. "Good. Then you'll understand what needs to happen tonight." Before Lena could respond, the doorbell chimed, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate through the penthouse's marble floors. Richard stood immediately, straightening his tie with the nervous energy of a man about to make a pitch he couldn't afford to lose. "That'll be our guest." He moved toward the entrance hall without another word, leaving Lena alone with her mounting dread. She heard voices, her father's jovial greeting, and another voice, lower, controlled, carrying the kind of authority that didn't need to be raised to command attention. Footsteps approached, expensive shoes against imported Italian tile. When Adrian Voss walked into the dining room, the air itself seemed to shift. He was tall, easily 6'3", with the kind of build that spoke of deliberate discipline rather than vanity. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from granite, all sharp angles and cold assessment. But it was his eyes that held her frozen, slate gray, calculating, missing nothing. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, tailored to perfection, not a thread out of place. This was a man who controlled everything in his orbit. "Mr. Voss, please sit." Richard gestured to the chair at the head of the table, the seat he usually occupied himself. The surrender of that position told Lena everything she needed to know about the power dynamics in the room. Adrian's gaze swept over her once, a clinical assessment that lasted perhaps 3 seconds before he took the offered seat. "Thank you for accommodating the late hour." Of course. "Can I offer you a drink? I have an excellent scotch." "No." The single word cut through Richard's nervous hospitality like a blade. "Let's discuss business." Richard's smile faltered, then reassembled itself. "Right. Yes. Business." He glanced at Lena, and something in his expression made her want to run. "Lena, darling, perhaps you should—" "She stays." Adrian's voice was flat, non-negotiable. "This concerns her directly." The room fell silent. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs so hard she was certain they could hear it. Her father's face had gone pale beneath his artificial tan. Yes, of course." Richard sat down heavily, his earlier confidence evaporating. "Mr. Voss, as I explained on the phone, I find myself in a temporary financial difficulty. Nothing serious, you understand, just a matter of cash flow. You owe $17 million to 3 separate criminal organizations." Adrian's words were precise, factual, devastating. "The Kozlov Bratva, the Castellano family, and the Yakuza's West Coast operations. You've been given extensions twice. There will not be a third. Also, $17 million. The number hit Lena like a physical blow. She'd known her father gambled, had watched him cycle through winning streaks and losses her entire life. But this, I have assets, Richard said quickly. The penthouse alone is worth $6 million with the mortgage you took out last year. Your other properties are leveraged beyond their value. Your business interests are smoke and mirrors built on credit that's about to be called in. Adrian leaned back in his chair, utterly relaxed, as if discussing the weather. You have nothing, Richard. Nothing except what you offered me 3 days ago. Lena's breath caught. Her father's eyes slid toward her, and in that moment she understood. No, 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 no. My daughter. Richard's voice had taken on a pleading quality that made Lena's skin crawl. As we discussed, she's intelligent, educated, well-mannered. She'd be an asset to your household. Companionship, administrative work, whatever you might need. Stop. Lena's voice cracked through the air. She stood so quickly her chair scraped against the floor with a harsh screech. What the hell is this? Lena, sweetheart, please understand. Richard reached for her, but she jerked away from his touch. Understand what? That you're trying to sell me? Like I'm property? Her voice rose despite her best efforts to control it. To pay your gambling debts? It's not like that. Then what is it like? She turned to Adrian, who'd been watching the exchange with the detached interest of someone observing a mildly entertaining play. And you're seriously considering this? Buying a human being? Adrian stood in one fluid motion, and suddenly the space between them felt charged with electricity. Not buying, he said softly. Your father is transferring his debt to me. In exchange, you'll enter into a contract for my household. Room, board, education, security, all provided. It's more opportunity than your father has ever given you. The words were calm, reasonable even, which somehow made them more horrifying. I don't care how you frame it. I'm not for sale. Lena turned to her father, desperately searching for any sign of the man who'd read her bedtime stories, who'd taught her to ride a bike, who'd promised her mother he'd always protect their daughter. Dad, please, don't do this. Richard wouldn't meet her eyes. You don't understand the people I owe money to, Lena. What they'll do to me. To you, this is the only way. The only way to save yourself, you mean? Bitterness flooded her mouth. What about me? What about what I want? What you want? For the first time, anger flashed across Richard's face. You've lived in luxury your entire life because of me. This penthouse, your private schools, your designer clothes, all of it came from me. And now I'm asking you to help me, and you're being selfish? The audacity of it stole her breath. I'm being selfish? Enough. Adrian's voice cut through the rising argument with surgical precision. He looked at Lena, and for a moment something almost like sympathy flickered in those cold gray eyes. You have a choice here. Hope sparked in her chest. I do? Yes. You can agree to the contract. 5 years in my employ, following my rules, completing the education and training I provide. At the end of that time, your father's debt is cleared, and you're free to go wherever you wish with credentials and resources most people never achieve. Or? Her voice was barely a whisper. Or you walk out that door right now, free. No obligation. He paused, letting the weight of it settle. And your father faces the consequences of his debts alone. The Kozlov Bratva is particularly creative in their collection methods. I understand they have a preference for power tools. Richard made a strangled sound. Lena, please, don't. She held up a hand, unable to look at him. Her mind raced, trying to find a third option, an escape route, anything. But she'd grown up in this world, on its periphery at least. She knew the names Adrian had mentioned, knew their reputations. If she walked away, her father would die. Slowly. Painfully. And despite everything, despite his selfishness, his manipulation, his willingness to trade her like a commodity, he was still her father. The man who'd held her when she'd cried after her mother died. Who'd been there, however imperfectly, for 23 years. What exactly would this contract entail? She forced herself to meet Adrian's gaze, to not let him see how badly her hands were shaking. You'll live in my estate. Attend university. I understand your father pulled you out before completing your degree. You'll be trained in business management, finance, and other useful skills. In exchange, you'll assist with my household operations and follow the rules I set. What kind of rules? The kind designed to keep you safe and functional. I require discipline, punctuality, and discretion. I don't tolerate deception or disloyalty." His expression remained neutral. "But I also don't tolerate abuse. You'll be protected, educated, and treated with the respect your father never showed you." The barb was subtle, but pointed. Richard flinched. "And if I refuse to follow these rules?" Lena asked. "Consequences. Proportional to the infraction. I'm not interested in breaking people, Miss Hart, but I am interested in structure and order." It was insane, all of it, and yet as she looked between Adrian's controlled calm and her father's desperate fear, she realized something. She'd never had real choices in her life anyway. Her father had always dictated her path, always controlled her options. At least this way she might gain something from the transaction. 5 years, she said slowly. "And at the end, I'm free. Completely free. No strings, no extensions, no hidden clauses. You have my word. The contract will be explicit. Your word." She laughed, the sound bitter. "The word of a criminal." Adrian's lips curved in something that might have been a smile on a warmer face. "I'm many things, Miss Hart, but I've built my reputation on keeping my agreements. Ask anyone in this city. My word is currency." Lena looked at her father one last time. He sat hunched in his chair, unable or unwilling to meet her eyes, and she felt something inside her crack and reshape itself. The love she'd had for him, desperate, seeking, never quite returned, was dying. But not dead yet. Not quite. "Fine." The word tasted like ashes. "I'll sign your contract." Richard's exhale of relief was audible. "Lena, sweetheart, you won't regret—" "Don't." She cut him off, her voice ice. "Don't pretend this is anything other than what it is. You're saving your own skin, and I'm paying the price. We both know it." Adrian pulled a document from the inside pocket of his suit jacket. He'd come prepared, she realized, with a sick feeling. Of course he had. This had been decided before she'd even known what was happening. The contract was surprisingly straightforward, written in clear language rather than the dense legalese she'd expected. 5 years of service. Specific duties outlined: household management, administrative assistance, social functions as needed. Requirements for education, completion of her bachelor's degree, additional training in business and finance. And the rules. Pages of them. Curfews, dress codes, behavioral expectations, consequences for violations ranging from additional duties to confinement to the estate. It read like a prison sentence dressed up in silk. There's a clause here about punishment. She forced herself to keep her voice steady. What does that mean exactly? It means I don't tolerate chaos or insubordination. If you break the rules, there will be consequences, but they'll be fair, predictable, and never physical. Adrian's gaze was direct. I'm not your father, Miss Hart. I don't make promises I can't keep, and I don't raise my hand to those under my protection. Under my protection. The phrase was telling. She would belong to him in a sense, even if he framed it as something else. Lena read through the entire document twice, searching for loopholes, traps, escape clauses. Found none. At the end of 5 years, assuming she fulfilled her obligations, the debt would be cleared and she'd receive a substantial settlement, enough to start over anywhere she wanted, if she survived 5 years. I need a pen. Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Adrian produced an expensive fountain pen. Of course he did. Lena took it, the metal cool against her fingers, and signed her name at the bottom of the contract. Her signature looked strange, shaky, the letters not quite forming properly, the signature of a woman signing away her freedom. Adrian countersigned, his script bold and decisive. Then he folded the document precisely and returned it to his pocket. We leave tonight. Pack what you need. You have 30 minutes. Tonight? Lena stared at him. I need time to... 30 minutes, Miss Hart. The people your father owes money to know where he lives. Once word spreads that his debt is being assumed by me, this place won't be safe for you. The reality of it crashed over her. This wasn't just about her father's debts anymore. She was entering a different world entirely, one where power and violence were currencies, where her safety depended on the protection of a man she didn't know. A man who'd just purchased 5 years of her life. Go, Adrian said, not unkindly. Pack essentials only. Everything else you need will be provided. Lena walked toward her bedroom on autopilot, her mind struggling to process the last hour. Behind her, she heard Adrian's voice, low and cold, addressing her father. The debt is transferred. You're clear with the Kozlovs, the Castellanos, and the Yakuza. But Richard, if you gamble away another dollar, if you so much as think about cards or dice or horses, I'll know, and I'll collect what you owe me in ways that make the Bratva look merciful. I understand. Thank you, Mr. Voss. Truly, I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because your daughter deserves better than to watch you torn apart by your own stupidity. A pause. You don't contact her. Not for 5 years. She's under my protection now, which means she's off limits to you and everyone else. Not if you understand. Lena didn't hear her father's response, but the silence was answer enough. In her bedroom, she moved mechanically, pulling a suitcase from her closet. What did one pack for indentured servitude? She grabbed clothes, practical things mostly, though she included a few items that made her feel like herself. The leather journal her mother had given her on her 10th birthday. Photos, her laptop, books. Her hand stilled on a framed picture of her parents on their wedding day, both of them young and smiling, radiant with hope for a future that would never materialize. Her mother had died 6 months after this photo was taken, a brain aneurysm that struck without warning. Lena had been too young to remember much of her, just impressions. Soft hands, a gentle voice, the smell of jasmine perfume. Would her mother have let this happen? Or had she married a man who would have sold his daughter to save himself, knowing exactly who he was? Lena left the photo on her dresser. 28 minutes later, she stood in the entrance hall with her suitcase, her purse, and the fragments of her former life. Adrian waited by the door, checking his phone with the casual attention of someone for whom time was always money. Richard hovered nearby, looking diminished somehow, smaller than he'd been an hour ago. Lena, He reached for her, and she stepped back. Don't touch me. Her voice was flat, emotionless. You made your choice. Live with it. You'll understand someday. When you're older, when you have children of your own, I already understand. She cut him off. I understand that you're a coward who values his own life more than his daughter's freedom. I understand that every promise you ever made was conditional. I understand exactly who you are, Dad. The word was bitter on her tongue. And I'll never forgive you. Richard's face crumpled, but Lena felt nothing. The love she'd had for him was gone, burned away by his betrayal. Adrian opened the door. Time to go. Lena walked through without looking back. The elevator ride down from the penthouse was silent. Adrian stood against the opposite wall, giving her space, his attention on his phone. Lena watched the floor numbers descend, 43, 42, 41, each one taking her further from her old life. When they reached the parking garage, a black SUV waited, engine running. A man in a dark suit opened the rear door. Security, clearly, with the watchful eyes and solid build of someone trained for violence. Miss Hart, he said with a nod that might have been respectful. Lena climbed in without responding. Adrian slid in beside her, and the door closed with a solid thunk that sounded too much like a prison cell locking. The SUV pulled smoothly into the night. Outside, the city sparkled with lights, oblivious to the transaction that had just taken place in that penthouse tower. People going about their lives, free in ways Lena no longer was. You're angry, Adrian's voice broke the silence. Perceptive, Lena said flatly. You have every right to be, but anger without direction is just poison. Channel it into something useful. She turned to look at him, this stranger who now controlled her life. Useful like what? Being the perfect little servant? Following your rules? Pretending this is anything other than slavery dressed up in legalese? Like rebuilding yourself into someone your father couldn't destroy. Adrian's gray eyes met hers, and there was something in them. Not kindness exactly, but understanding. He stole your education, your independence, your future. I'm offering you a chance to take all of that back. Yes, on my terms. Yes, within structure and rules. But unlike your father, I actually invest in the people under my protection. Why? The question burst out of her. Why bother? You could have just, taken the loss on his debt or collected some other way. Why go through all this? Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his gaze turning to the window. Because waste offends me. Your father was wasting you, your intelligence, your potential, everything. I don't collect people, Miss Hart. I don't have a harem of servants or a stable of slaves. What I have is an organization that requires exceptional people. And despite your current circumstances, I believe you could be exceptional. It was the most he'd said at once, and Lena didn't know what to do with it. Was it manipulation, truth, some combination? And if I'm not? If I can't meet your standards? Then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, but I don't think we will. He glanced at her. You stood up to me in that dining room. Most people can't. You asked the right questions about the contract. You're terrified right now, but you're thinking through it, planning, analyzing. That's exactly the kind of person I need. Need, not want. The distinction felt important. They drove through the city's downtown core and out into the hills where the old money lived in estates hidden behind high walls and extensive security. The SUV turned onto a private road that wound up through manicured landscaping lit by subtle ground lights. When the estate came into view, Lena's breath caught despite herself. It wasn't ostentatious, no marble statues or golden gates. Instead, it was all clean lines and modern architecture blended seamlessly with the natural landscape. Glass and steel and stone, lit from within with warm light, elegant, powerful, controlled, like the man who owned it. The SUV pulled up to the main entrance. Adrian stepped out and waited while Lena gathered her things. The same security guard who'd opened the door took her suitcase. Marcus will show you to your quarters, Adrian said. Get settled. We'll discuss expectations and schedules in the morning. 9 a.m. sharp in my office. Don't be late. He walked toward the house without waiting for a response, his stride confident, already moving on to the next item on his agenda. Marcus gestured for Lena to follow. This way, Miss Hart. Inside, the house was as impressive as the exterior. An open floor plan with high ceilings, modern furnishings that managed to be comfortable without being soft. Art on the walls that probably cost more than her father's penthouse. Everything precise, curated, intentional. They climbed a curved staircase to the second floor and down a hallway. Marcus stopped at a door and opened it. Your room, miss. Bathroom's through there. Closet's been stocked with basics, but we'll arrange for anything specific you need. Kitchen's downstairs, always accessible. If you need anything tonight, press 0 on the house phone. Someone's always available. Lena stepped into the room and stopped. It was nice. More than nice. A large bed with crisp white linens. A sitting area with a comfortable chair and good lighting. A desk. Wide windows overlooking the grounds, though the view was dark now. There's a welcome packet on the desk, Marcus continued. House rules, daily schedules, contact information. Mr. Voss expects you to review it before tomorrow's meeting. He set her suitcase by the closet. Is there anything you need right now? No, thank you. The words came automatically. Marcus nodded and left, closing the door quietly behind him. Alone, Lena sank onto the edge of the bed. The room was comfortable. The house was beautiful. Adrian had been almost reasonable, and none of it changed the fact that she was trapped. She should cry, should rage, should break something. Instead, she felt numb, hollowed out, like someone had scooped out everything inside her and left just a shell. The welcome packet sat on the desk, crisp and professional. Lena forced herself to stand and retrieve it. If she was going to survive this, she needed information. The first page was a welcome letter in Adrian's precise handwriting. Miss Hart, welcome to Voss Estate. I expect the transition will be difficult, but I trust you'll adapt quickly. The rules outlined in this packet are non-negotiable, but they exist for your protection as much as my convenience. Tomorrow we'll discuss your education plan and role within the household. Come prepared with questions. I value initiative and intelligence. Your 5 years begin now. Make them count. Adrian Voss. The rules were extensive. Wake time at 6:30 a.m. Breakfast at 7. Proper dress code for different areas of the house. No visitors without prior approval. No leaving the estate grounds without escort. Daily check-ins with Adrian or his designated staff. Technology use monitored. And consequences for violations, everything from extra duties to confinement to quarters to... The final clause made her stomach twist. Severe or repeated violations may result in contract termination with debt collection reverting to original creditors. In other words, if she screwed up badly enough, her father would die. The trap was perfect. Invisible bars, but bars nonetheless. Lena changed mechanically, unpacked her few belongings, set an alarm on her phone, climbed into the expensive bed with its soft sheets and down comforter, stared at the ceiling for hours, unable to sleep, her mind replaying the evening on an endless loop. Her father's desperate face, the cold calculation in Adrian's eyes, the scratch of pen on paper as she signed away 5 years. At some point, exhaustion won. She fell into restless dreams of locked doors and signatures written in red ink, and her mother's voice calling her name from somewhere very far away. The alarm jolted her awake at 6:15 a.m. She'd set it early, refusing to give Adrian the satisfaction of her being late on her first day. Lena dragged herself to the bathroom and stopped short. It was spa-like, all marble and glass, with a rainfall shower and deep soaking tub. Luxury products lined the shelves, high-end brands she recognized from magazines. Fresh towels, thick and soft. The reminder that her cage was gilded didn't make it less of a cage. She showered quickly, the hot water helping to clear the fog from her head. Dressed in dark jeans and a simple sweater, the dress code had specified business casual for daytime unless otherwise directed. Minimal makeup, hair pulled back. In the mirror, she looked pale, shadows under her eyes, but composed. That was something, at least. The house was quiet when she made her way downstairs. She followed the smell of coffee to a spacious kitchen where a woman in her 50s was preparing breakfast. "Good morning." The woman turned with a warm smile. "You must be Lena. I'm Margaret, the house manager. Coffee? Please." Lena accepted the mug gratefully, cradling the warmth between her hands. "There's fruit, yogurt, toast, eggs if you'd like. Mr. Voss already ate. He starts his day early." Margaret bustled around the kitchen with the easy efficiency of someone who'd run this household for years. "How was your first night?" "Fine." The lie came easily. "The room is very comfortable." "Good, good. If you need anything adjusted, just let me know. We want you to feel at home here." Home. The word felt wrong. But Margaret seemed genuinely kind, and Lena was learning to take her allies where she could find them. She managed some fruit and toast, though her stomach was tight with nerves about the approaching meeting. At 8:45, she made her way back upstairs to Adrian's office, following the directions from the welcome packet. The door was solid wood, intimidating. Lena raised her hand to knock and hesitated. This was it. The moment her new life truly began. She knocked. "Come in." Adrian sat behind a massive desk, his attention on a computer screen. He'd traded the suit from last night for a different one, charcoal gray today, equally expensive. The office was all dark wood and leather, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a view that overlooked the grounds. "Sit." He gestured to one of the chairs facing his desk without looking up. Lena sat, folding her hands in her lap to keep them from shaking. Waited. After a long moment, Adrian finished whatever he was doing and turned his full attention to her. Those gray eyes swept over her in quick assessment. "You read the packet." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes." "Questions?" "Several." Lena lifted her chin. "The education component. Am I expected to attend classes on campus or online?" "Campus, UCLA. You'll resume your studies in political science. I believe that was your major before your father pulled you out. Classes start in 2 weeks, which gives us time to get you registered and prepared." That surprised her. She'd expected isolation, not freedom to attend a regular university. "And I'll be, what, escorted?" "Marcus will drive you and remain nearby, yes. Not as a jailer, Miss Hart. As protection. You're associated with me now, which makes you a potential target for people who might want leverage." The reminder that she'd entered a dangerous world settled like lead in her stomach. The rules say I can't leave the estate without escort. Does that include campus? No. Once you're on campus, you're free to move around as needed. But you'll check in with Marcus at designated times and you'll be home by curfew. Break that rule, and your campus privileges will be restricted. Fair, by his standards. Still a leash, but longer than she'd expected. The consequences section mentions termination of contract. What constitutes a severe violation? Adrian leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Betrayal, theft, putting yourself or others in danger through reckless behavior, attempting to flee in a way that would expose my operations or create security risks. His gaze sharpened. I'm not interested in punishing you for minor infractions, Miss Hart, but I also can't allow chaos or disloyalty in my household. As long as you follow the reasonable boundaries I've set, you'll be fine. And if I disagree with what constitutes reasonable, then we'll discuss it. I'm not a tyrant, but I am the final authority here. That's non-negotiable. He pulled out a tablet and made a few swipes. I've arranged for you to meet with an academic advisor next week to plan your coursework. You'll need to take a full load to graduate on schedule, 15 credits minimum per semester. Additionally, you'll spend 10 hours per week working with my financial analyst to learn business management and accounting. Lena blinked. That was actually educational, useful, not what she'd expected from an arrangement she'd thought would be glorified servitude. What about my duties here? The household operations mentioned in the contract? You'll assist Margaret with coordinating household staff, managing schedules and supplies, handling correspondence. Eventually, you'll take over those responsibilities entirely as she transitions to retirement. It's administrative work, organizational, detailed, exactly the kind of thing you'll need to understand if you want to run anything successfully. He was training her, actually training her for skills that would matter after her contract ended. Lena studied Adrian's face, searching for the manipulation, the trap, found only that same cool calculation, like she was a project he'd invested in and intended to see succeed. Why? The question slipped out. I don't understand why you're bothering with all this. The education, the training. You could have just kept me as staff, made me clean or cook or whatever. Because that would be a waste. Adrian set down the tablet. You want to know who I am, Miss Hart? I'll tell you. I run one of the most efficient criminal organizations in this city. Smuggling, money laundering, information brokerage. Nothing violent, nothing that harms civilians, but illegal nonetheless. I've built that organization by recognizing talent and developing it, by creating systems that work, by refusing to settle for mediocrity. He stood and walked to the window, hands in his pockets, looking out over the grounds. Your father saw you as a resource to be exploited or a burden to be offloaded. I see potential. Raw, undeveloped potential. The question is whether you're willing to push past your anger and resentment long enough to realize I'm offering you something he never would have. Actual power. Real independence. The kind that comes from competence, not luck or manipulation. Lena's throat felt tight. And what do you get out of it? Adrian turned back to face her. An extremely competent person managing my household operations in 2 years when Margaret retires. Someone I can trust, because they understand that loyalty is a two-way street, and possibly, if you prove as capable as I think you will be, a business associate when your contract ends. He tilted his head slightly. I'm not a philanthropist, Miss Hart, but I'm also not short-sighted. Investing in you benefits us both. It made a terrible kind of sense. Ruthless, yes. Transactional, absolutely. But honest in a way her father had never been. Okay, Lena took a breath. So what do we do now? What's my schedule? Adrian returned to his desk and pulled up a calendar on his screen, turning it so she could see. Mornings you'll work with Margaret, learning the household systems. Afternoons are for your education. Once classes start, you'll be on campus. Right now, you'll work with my financial analyst, David Chen. He's expecting you at 1 p.m. today. Evenings are yours unless there's a social function you're required to attend. Social functions? Occasionally I host dinners or attend events where having an intelligent, well-spoken companion is useful. Part of your role. The dress code for those will be formal, and I'll expect you to handle conversation gracefully. Consider it practice for whatever career you choose after this. Companion. The word made her skin crawl despite his clinical delivery. Adrian must have seen something in her expression because his eyes narrowed slightly. I'm not interested in you sexually, Miss Hart. Don't flatter yourself. What I need is someone who can hold their own in rooms full of dangerous, intelligent people and make me look like I have excellent taste in my associates. Think of yourself as a professional +1, nothing more. The bluntness was almost refreshing. And if someone at these events gets the wrong idea? They won't. You're under my protection, which means anyone who touches you inappropriately answers to me. That's not a threat you need to worry about. Lena wanted to hate him, wanted to find the villain in this scenario and direct all her rage at a clear target, But Adrian refused to be simple, cruel but not sadistic, controlling but not unreasonable, using her but also investing in her. It was disorienting. I think that covers the basics. Adrian closed the calendar. You'll report here every morning at 9 for the next week, so we can make sure you understand the household operations and routines. After that, we'll adjust based on your class schedule. Any other questions? Just one. Lena met his eyes directly. What happens if I actually do well at all this? If I exceed your expectations? For the first time, something that might have been a smile flickered across Adrian's face. Then we'll renegotiate. I told you I value competence. Prove yourself indispensable, and we'll discuss terms that benefit us both. It was the first hint of hope she'd felt since signing that contract. Not freedom exactly, but possibility. A path forward that wasn't just survival. Understood. Lena stood. I'll meet with Margaret now, unless you need anything else. Go ahead. And Miss Hart? He waited until she turned back. Welcome to Voss Estate. Try not to waste the opportunity. Lena left the office with her mind spinning. She'd expected a monster, a cruel overlord who'd make her life hell. Instead, she'd found something more complex. A man who'd bought her freedom, yes, but seemed genuinely interested in helping her rebuild it into something stronger. She didn't trust him, couldn't afford to, not when he still held all the power. But maybe, just maybe, she could work with him. And if she played this right, 5 years from now, she'd walk away with more than just her freedom. She'd walk away with the skills and resources to never be powerless again. Margaret was waiting in the kitchen when Lena came downstairs. The next several hours passed in a blur of household systems, ordering, inventory, staff schedules, maintenance coordination. Margaret was patient and thorough, clearly passionate about the smooth operation of the estate. Mr. Voss values efficiency above almost everything, she explained. He never wants to think about whether there's coffee in the morning or clean shirts in his closet. That's our job, to make his life frictionless so he can focus on his business. At 1 p.m., Lena met David Chen in a home office that had been converted into a workspace for financial operations. David was young, maybe 30, with sharp eyes and an easy manner. So you're the new household manager in training, he said, gesturing for her to sit. Adrian mentioned you'd be sitting in on some finance sessions. What's your background? 2 years of political science before I had to drop out. Some basic econ and statistics. Nothing specialized. Perfect. We'll start with foundations then. David pulled up a spreadsheet. This is the household operating budget. Let me show you how it's structured. The next 2 hours were intense. David taught like someone who loved the material, breaking down complex financial concepts into digestible pieces. By the end, Lena's head was spinning, but she'd understood more about money management than she'd learned in her entire life. You're a quick study, David said approvingly as they wrapped up. Same time tomorrow? I'll be here. Dinner was served at 7 in a formal dining room. To Lena's surprise, Adrian joined her. She'd half expected to eat alone. How was your first day? He asked, cutting into his steak with precise movements. Overwhelming, but good. Margaret is an excellent teacher. She is. You'll learn a lot from her. Adrian took a sip of wine. David said you picked up the financial concepts quickly. That's promising. The casual conversation was jarring, like they were colleagues rather than whatever they actually were. I have a question, Lena said, about the contract. Adrian raised an eyebrow but nodded for her to continue. It says I'll receive a settlement at the end of 5 years. How much are we talking about? $500,000. Paid in full upon successful completion of your contract term. He watched her reaction. Enough to start over anywhere you want. Grad school, business venture, complete freedom. It's yours. $500,000. The number took her breath away. That's generous. It's fair compensation for 5 years of competent service and the restrictions I'm placing on your freedom. I told you, I'm not interested in exploitation. This is a transaction, Miss Hart. Both parties should benefit. Lena processed that, turning it over in her mind. $500,000, a degree, skills, resources. If she survived this with her mind intact, she'd walk away in a better position than most people achieved in a lifetime. Okay, she said finally, then I'll hold up my end. See that you do. They finished dinner in comfortable silence. After, Lena retreated to her room, exhausted but wired. She pulled out her laptop and did what she probably should have done before signing the contract, researched Adrian Voss. The results were interesting. Very little concrete information, but plenty of rumors and speculation. Criminal connections, definitely, but as he'd said, nothing violent. No drugs, no human trafficking, no brutal enforcement. More like a shadow CEO, running an empire most people didn't know existed. There were photos from charity events and business functions. Adrian in expensive suits, always with different companions, men and women both. Always elegant, always appropriate. Never the same person twice. She was being slotted into a role, Lena realized. Not a romantic partner, but window dressing. A signal that he had the resources and taste to attract intelligent, attractive people into his orbit. It should have felt demeaning. Somehow it just felt practical. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Marcus. Adding you to estate security contacts. Save this number. Any safety concerns? Text or call immediately. Welcome to the team." Team. Like she'd joined something rather than been conscripted into it. Lena saved the number and set her phone aside. Looked around the comfortable room that was her cage. Tried to imagine 5 years here. Tried to imagine the person she might become in that time. Outside, the estate grounds were dark except for subtle security lighting. Somewhere in the house, Adrian was probably still working. Margaret had mentioned he rarely slept more than 5 hours a night. A man who'd built an empire through discipline, control, and refusing to settle for less than excellence. A man who'd bought her, yes, but seemed determined to forge her into something stronger. Lena Hart had entered this house as a victim, betrayed by her father, sold to pay his debts, powerless and afraid. She wouldn't leave it that way. 5 years. She could survive 5 years of anything if it meant walking away free, educated, financially secure, and never dependent on anyone again. And if along the way she learned how to navigate Adrian Voss's complex world, how to hold her own in rooms full of dangerous people, how to turn structure and discipline into strength. Well, that would be revenge enough on the father who'd tried to throw her away. Lena pulled out her journal, the one her mother had given her, and began to write. Not about grief or anger, though both still churned inside her. About plans, goals, the person she intended to become. The girl who'd sat in that penthouse dining room was gone, destroyed by her father's betrayal. The woman who would emerge 5 years from now would be someone entirely new. Someone her mother might have been proud of. Someone even Adrian Voss would have to respect. The transformation had already begun. The first week dissolved into routine faster than Lena expected. Wake at 6:30 to the soft chime of her alarm. Shower in the marble bathroom that still felt too luxurious to be real. Dress in the business casual clothes that had appeared in her closet. Quality pieces in neutrals and deep colors that fit perfectly, though she'd never given measurements. Breakfast at 7 with Margaret, who had a gift for making even mundane conversations about inventory feel engaging. Then the real work began. Margaret's domain was vast and intricate, a web of schedules, vendors, staff coordination, and anticipatory problem-solving that kept the estate running like a Swiss watch. Lena absorbed it all with the desperate focus of someone who understood that competence was her only path forward. The key, Margaret explained on the third day, walking Lena through the weekly menu planning, is to know what Mr. Voss needs before he knows he needs it. He travels frequently, sometimes with 48 hours notice. That means his travel essentials are always packed and ready. His dry cleaning is done on a set schedule, so there's never a question of whether he has what he needs. His preferences are documented and maintained. Lena studied the detailed file Margaret had compiled over 15 years of service. Adrian took his coffee black, 2 cups in the morning before 6 a.m. He ate breakfast, but rarely lunch. Dinner was his primary meal, and he preferred clean proteins and vegetables, nothing heavy that would slow him down. He was allergic to shellfish. He hated unnecessary conversation before 9 a.m. He expected problems to come with proposed solutions, not just complaints. "He sounds exhausting," Lena muttered, scanning the pages. Margaret laughed. "He's exacting, but he's also fair, and he never asks for anything unreasonable. Learn his patterns, anticipate his needs, and you'll find he's actually quite easy to work for." She paused. "Unlike some employers I could mention from my younger days." The afternoons with David Chen were equally intense, but in a different way. He made finance accessible, even fascinating, showing her how money moved through legitimate and shadow economies, how to read balance sheets and spot inconsistencies, how to structure deals that benefited all parties while protecting your interests. Adrian doesn't cheat people, David explained during their fourth session. That's bad business. He creates situations where everyone wins, but he wins more. That's the art of it, making sure your partners feel good about the deal, even though you've structured it to your advantage. That seems manipulative, Lena said. It's strategic. There's a difference. David pulled up a case study. Look at this acquisition he did 2 years ago. The seller thought he was getting top dollar. Adrian thought he was getting an undervalued asset with hidden potential. Both parties were happy. 6 months later, Adrian had tripled the value through restructuring. Who got manipulated? The seller, who didn't see the potential. Or the seller, who got paid exactly what he thought it was worth and walked away satisfied. David leaned back in his chair. Adrian's philosophy is that you can't build an empire on resentment. People need to feel good about working with you, even in the criminal world. Especially in the criminal world, where contracts aren't enforceable in court. It was a masterclass in practical psychology disguised as finance lessons. On Friday of that first week, Adrian summoned her to his office at 3 p.m., an unusual time since their morning check-ins had become routine. "Sit," he said without preamble. "We need to discuss your security training." Lena blinked. "My what?" "Security training. Self-defense, situational awareness, basic protective protocols." Adrian pulled up a schedule on his tablet. "You'll start Monday with Marcus, 2 hours every afternoon before your session with David." "I don't understand. I thought Marcus was my security. Why do I need training?" "Because I don't believe in creating dependencies." Adrian's gray eyes were sharp. "You're associated with me now, which makes you a potential target. I provide security, yes, but I also expect you to be able to protect yourself if circumstances require it. Marcus will teach you basic hand-to-hand defense, how to identify threats, how to extract yourself from dangerous situations." Lena's stomach tightened. "Has something happened? Am I in danger?" "Not specifically, but preparation isn't about responding to current threats. It's about being ready for future ones." He set down the tablet. "Also, learning to defend yourself is empowering. I suspect you could use some of that." The observation was uncomfortably accurate. Lena had felt powerless for so long, first under her father's erratic control, now under Adrian's structured authority. The idea of physical competence, of being able to protect herself, sent an unexpected thrill through her. "Okay," she said. "I'll do it." "I know you will. It's not optional." Adrian almost smiled. "But I'm glad you're willing. Margaret tells me you're adapting well to the household operations. David says you're exceeding his expectations in the finance sessions. Keep it up." The praise was sparse but felt earned. Lena left the office with something unfamiliar warming her chest. Not happiness exactly, but satisfaction. She was good at this. The structure, the learning, the challenge of mastering new systems. For the first time in her adult life, she was building real competence instead of just surviving her father's chaos. That evening, she found herself in the estate's library, a 2-story room lined with books that Adrian had mentioned she was free to use. She ran her fingers along the spines, marveling at the collection. Classic literature, contemporary fiction, dense academic texts on economics and political theory, biographies of historical figures. "Find something interesting?" Adrian's voice made her jump. He stood in the doorway, jacket discarded, tie loosened, the most casual she'd seen him. In his hand was a tumbler of amber liquid that she recognized as the expensive scotch he occasionally drank. "Just browsing. I didn't realize you were a reader." Knowledge is power. Books are one of the most efficient delivery mechanisms. He moved into the room, selecting a volume from a high shelf with practiced ease. "Margaret mentioned you were an English minor before switching to political science." "Poetry, actually. Completely impractical, according to my father." The bitterness crept in before she could stop it. "Poetry teaches you to see beneath surface meanings, to understand how language shapes perception. That's incredibly practical if you know how to apply it." Adrian handed her the book he'd selected, a collection of Maya Angelou's work. "Try this." She understood power dynamics better than most political theorists. Lena took the book, startled by the recommendation. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just read it." He moved toward the door, then paused. "You're doing well, Miss Hart. Better than I expected this quickly. Keep pushing yourself. He left before she could respond. Lena stood alone in the library, holding Maya Angelou's poetry, trying to reconcile the man who'd bought her with the man who'd just recommended literature about resilience and self-definition. Adrian Voss was a walking contradiction, ruthless but not cruel, controlling but not crushing, transactional yet somehow invested in her development. Every time she thought she had him figured out, he revealed another layer. It was disorienting and infuriating and oddly compelling all at once. Monday morning brought her first session with Marcus. He was waiting in the estate's gym, a fully equipped space in the lower level that Lena hadn't explored yet. "Miss Hart," Marcus nodded. "Ready to learn how not to be a victim?" His bluntness was refreshing. "I think so." "Good. First rule, awareness is your best weapon. Most attacks succeed because the victim isn't paying attention." He gestured for her to stand in the center of the mat. "Show me how you'd walk through a parking garage at night." Lena walked across the mat, suddenly self-conscious. "Stop." Marcus shook his head. "You're looking at the ground. Your hands are in your pockets. Your body language says easy target, again. This time, head up, hands free, aware of your surroundings. Move with purpose." She tried again, forcing herself to project confidence she didn't feel. "Better. Predators look for vulnerability. Don't give it to them." Marcus spent the next 20 minutes drilling her on awareness. How to scan a room, identify exits, read body language that telegraphed aggression. Then they moved to physical techniques. "I'm not trying to make you a fighter," he explained. "I'm teaching you to create opportunities to escape. That's the goal. Get away. Get to safety. Your target areas are eyes, throat, groin, knees. Hit hard, hit fast, and run." The training was brutal. Marcus didn't hold back, didn't coddle her. When she failed to block properly, she felt it. When her strike lacked commitment, he made her repeat it until it was right. By the end of 2 hours, Lena was drenched in sweat, muscles screaming, but something fierce had awakened inside her. She'd never been physical before, had avoided conflict her entire life. This was different. This was taking up space, refusing to be small, learning to fight back. "Good work," Marcus said as she gulped water. "Same time tomorrow. We'll work on escape techniques." Lena nodded, too breathless to speak. That night, she soaked in the deep tub, her body aching in ways that felt earned rather than inflicted. Through the bathroom door, she could hear her phone buzzing, probably David sending additional reading materials, which he did religiously. But when she finally checked, the message was from an unknown number. "Lena, it's your father. I know you're angry, but please, we need to talk. I miss you. I'm sorry for everything. Please, call me." Her hand shook. The anger she'd been channeling into productivity roared back to life, hot and vicious. He missed her. He was sorry. Words, just words, meaning nothing, changing nothing. Lena blocked the number and deleted the message. Then she pulled up the house phone and called the main office. Marcus answered. "Miss Hart, everything okay?" "My father just texted me from a number I don't recognize. I thought the contract stipulated no contact." "It does. How did you respond?" "Blocked and deleted." "Good. Send me the number. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again." A pause. "You did the right thing. Don't let him pull you back into his chaos." After hanging up, Lena sat on her bed, staring at her phone. Her father had always been good with words, could charm, manipulate, promise anything. But words without action were just noise. Adrian's words, sparse as they were, came with follow-through. Promises kept. Structure maintained. It was such a stark contrast that it made her head spin. The second week brought new challenges. Her class schedule arrived. UCLA had accepted her re-enrollment with surprising speed, which Lena suspected had something to do with Adrian's influence. She'd be taking 15 credits. Political theory, microeconomics, statistics, a writing seminar, and contemporary international relations. "That's ambitious," David commented when she showed him the schedule. "You sure you can handle all that plus the household training?" "I don't have a choice. The contract requires I graduate on time." "The contract requires you maintain satisfactory progress. Adrian would adjust if needed." David studied her face. "You're pushing yourself hard. Why?" "Because competence was armor. Because if she kept moving, kept learning, kept building, she didn't have to sit still with the grief and rage that lived just beneath her surface calm. Because I don't want to waste this, Lena said instead. David nodded slowly. Just remember, burning out helps no one. Pace yourself. But pacing felt like surrender, so Lena pushed harder. Mornings with Margaret grew more complex as she took on actual household coordination. By the end of week 2, she was managing staff schedules, coordinating with vendors, and handling minor crises, a delayed grocery delivery, a scheduling conflict with the groundskeeping crew, a last-minute dinner party Adrian was hosting. You're a natural at this, Margaret said, watching Lena reorganize the week's meal prep to accommodate the dinner party. Most people take months to develop this kind of systems thinking. I had good practice managing my father's chaos. This is just organized chaos. There's no chaos here, dear, just complexity, and you're handling it beautifully. The afternoons with Marcus were transforming her body and mind. She was getting stronger, faster, more confident in her ability to take up space and defend it. When she walked across campus for the first time, Marcus trailing at a discreet distance, Lena moved differently. Head up, shoulders back, aware but not afraid. She caught her reflection in a building window and barely recognized herself. The evening finance sessions with David had evolved into broader business strategy discussions. He'd started bringing her into real scenarios, not naming names, but walking through deals Adrian was considering, asking for her analysis. What would you recommend here? David asked, showing her a proposal for acquiring a shipping company. The seller wants $15 million. Our assessment suggests it's worth $12. Lena studied the numbers, applying everything she'd learned. Offer 13. Point to the maintenance costs they've deferred. That's leverage. But structure it so they get a percentage of increased profits over the next 2 years if we turn it around. That way they feel like they're getting their $15 million in value, just deferred. David grinned. That's exactly what Adrian proposed yesterday. You're thinking like him. The comment should have disturbed her. Instead, she felt proud. Friday of the second week, Adrian invited her to dinner, not in the formal dining room, but in a smaller sitting room off the kitchen. Margaret had prepared something elegant but simple, and they ate in comfortable silence for several minutes. You start classes Monday, Adrian finally said. Yes, I'm ready. I'm sure you are. But remember, Marcus is there for your protection, not your supervision. You don't need to check in with him every hour. Just touch base morning, midday, and before heading home. The freedom surprised her. You're not worried I'll run? Where would you go? Adrian's gray eyes were shrewd. You're smart enough to understand that running would accomplish nothing except putting your father at risk and yourself on the street with no resources. Besides, I don't think you want to run anymore. The observation landed like a stone in still water, rippling outward. He was right. Somewhere in the past 2 weeks, her desperate desire to escape had shifted into something else. A determination to master this situation, to extract every possible advantage from her circumstances. I'm not sure what I want, Lena admitted quietly, except to never be powerless again. Then we have aligned interests. Power comes from competence, resources, and reputation. I'm helping you build all three. Adrian set down his fork. The dinner party tomorrow night, you'll attend as my companion. I'll introduce you as my executive assistant in training. People will make assumptions. Let them. What kind of assumptions? That you're more than staff, that you have my ear and potentially my favor. It's useful positioning, makes people treat you with respect and caution. His expression remained neutral. I'll be clear. There's nothing romantic or sexual in this arrangement, but perception is often more powerful than reality. If people think you have influence, you effectively do. Lena processed that, turning it over. You're using me as a social signal. I'm creating a role that benefits us both. You get practice navigating high-stakes social situations with powerful, dangerous people. You build a reputation as someone in my inner circle. That has value, even after your contract ends. It was manipulation, but the honest kind, laid out clearly with mutual benefit acknowledged. What do I wear to this dinner party? Something formal. Black would be appropriate. There's a selection in your closet. Margaret took the liberty of ordering options based on the measurements the estate tailor took. Of course there were options. Nothing in Adrian's world was left to chance. The next evening, Lena stood in front of her mirror, barely recognizing herself. The black dress was elegant, sleeveless, fitted at the waist, falling to just below the knee. Sophisticated without being overtly sexy. She'd styled her hair in a simple updo, minimal jewelry, understated makeup. She looked older, more polished, like someone who belonged in Adrian Voss's world. Margaret appeared in the doorway, smiling. "Perfect. Mr. Voss asked me to give you this." She held out a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet. Simple, expensive, beautiful. "He said it's on loan for the evening," Margaret explained. "Appearances matter at these events." Lena fastened the bracelet, the cool metal settling against her wrist like a collar. That's what it was, really, a mark of ownership dressed up as jewelry. But when she descended the stairs to find Adrian waiting in the foyer, looking devastating in a tailored black suit, she couldn't deny the surge of something that felt uncomfortably like pride. He assessed her appearance with that clinical gaze. "You look appropriate. Remember, speak when spoken to, but don't be passive. These people respect intelligence and confidence. Show them both." "Understood." And Lena, he waited until she met his eyes. "Stay within sight of me or Marcus at all times. Some of tonight's guests are unpredictable." The warning sent ice down her spine. This wasn't just a dinner party. This was business, the kind where danger lurked beneath polite conversation. The guests began arriving at 7. Lena positioned herself near Adrian, watching as he transformed into a gracious host, charming, attentive, reading every person who walked through the door with perfect precision. "Adrian, wonderful to see you." A silver-haired man in his 60s approached, his smile not reaching his eyes. "And who is this lovely creature?" "Victor, allow me to introduce Lena Hart, my executive assistant." Adrian's hand settled lightly at the small of her back, a possessive gesture that wasn't lost on Victor. "Lena, Victor Constantine runs shipping operations throughout the West Coast." Lena extended her hand. "Mr. Constantine, a pleasure." Victor's grip was just shy of uncomfortable. "The pleasure is mine. Adrian's never introduced anyone as his assistant before. You must be quite special." "I'm quite competent," Lena said smoothly, which I imagine is what Adrian values. Victor laughed, but his eyes remained calculating. "Indeed. Well, don't let him work you too hard, my dear. He has a tendency to expect perfection." "I find that excellence is worth expecting," Adrian said mildly, already guiding Lena toward the next arrival. The evening unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Adrian introduced her to a parade of dangerous people, crime bosses, corrupt officials, shadowy business figures. Lena played her role perfectly, speaking when appropriate, listening intently, projecting quiet confidence. She caught fragments of conversation that revealed the true nature of Adrian's world. Shipping routes that moved more than legal cargo. Financial structures designed to hide money. Territories divided and protected through careful negotiation rather than violence. It was a criminal empire, yes, but run with the efficiency and sophistication of a Fortune 500 company. During dinner, an elaborate affair with 8 courses, Lena found herself seated between a woman named Sophia Chen, who ran art acquisition, which Lena suspected was code for high-end theft, and a man called James Rivera, who controlled several casinos. "So, Lena," Sophia said, her smile sharp as a knife, "how did you come to work for Adrian? He's notoriously selective." "Through a mutual acquaintance," Lena replied vaguely. "I needed a position. He needed competent assistance. It worked out well for both parties." "I'm sure it did." Sophia's eyes glittered with speculation. "Adrian doesn't usually mix business with other interests." The implication was clear. Lena met her gaze directly. "Then I suppose he's making an exception for competence." James laughed. "She's got spine, Adrian. I like her." Across the table, Adrian raised his wine glass slightly in acknowledgement. His expression revealed nothing, but Lena felt she'd passed some kind of test. After dinner, guests mingled in the main sitting room. Lena accepted a glass of champagne she had no intention of drinking and positioned herself where she could observe. Adrian moved through the room like a shark, smooth, dangerous, always in control. "You're doing well." Marcus appeared at her elbow, his presence reassuring. "Half these people would eat you alive if they sensed weakness. You're not showing any." "I'm terrified," Lena admitted quietly. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Just don't let them see it. A commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. A late arrival, a man in his 40s with cold eyes and an aura of barely contained violence. Lena felt Adrian tense from across the room, though his expression remained pleasant. "Dmitri," Adrian said, moving to greet the newcomer. "I wasn't expecting you." "Last-minute change of plans." Dmitri's accent was thick, Russian. His gaze swept the room and landed on Lena with uncomfortable intensity. "You are collecting beautiful things now, Adrian? This is new." "Dmitri Kozlov, meet Lena Hart, my executive assistant." Kozlov. The name from that first night, one of the organizations her father had owed money to. Dmitri crossed the room to her, ignoring social niceties. "Hart, this name is familiar." Lena's heart hammered, but she kept her expression neutral. "It's fairly common." "Perhaps?" Dmitri's smile was predatory. "Or perhaps you are a daughter of Richard Hart, the man who owed my organization considerable money?" The room went silent. Every dangerous person in it was suddenly focused on this moment, this revelation. Adrian appeared at Lena's side, his presence a shield. "Her father's debts were transferred to me. The matter is settled." "Ah, so you are collecting debts now too?" Dmitri's eyes never left Lena. "What is she worth, this daughter? What did you pay?" "That's between Richard Hart and myself." Adrian's voice had gone cold. All pretense of warmth vanished. "And it's none of your concern." "Everything in this city is my concern." Dmitri stepped closer, and Lena caught the scent of expensive cologne and underlying danger, especially when it involves my money. "Your money was paid in full, or would you like to examine the wire transfer records again?" The tension in the room was suffocating. Lena forced herself to breathe normally, to not show the terror clawing at her throat. Dmitri stared at Adrian for a long moment, some silent battle of wills happening between them. Finally, he laughed, a harsh sound without humor. Of course, business is concluded. I am just curious about such an unusual transaction." "Your curiosity is noted." Adrian's hand found the small of Lena's back again, but this time the touch was protective rather than possessive. "If you'll excuse us, I need to attend to my other guests." He guided Lena away, Marcus falling into step behind them. They moved through the sitting room to Adrian's private office, the door closing behind them with a solid click. "Are you all right?" Adrian asked immediately. Lena nodded, not trusting her voice. "Dmitri is a provocateur. He was testing boundaries, seeing if he could rattle me by going after you." Adrian poured her a glass of water from the bar. "Drink this." She obeyed, her hands only shaking slightly. "I'm sorry you had to experience that," Adrian continued, "but it's important you understand. This is why the security training matters. This is why you don't leave the estate without protection. People like Dmitri see everything and everyone as potential leverage. He knows about my father, about the debt transfer." Lena set down the glass. "Does that put me in danger?" "Not as long as you're under my protection. Dmitri was making a point, but he won't act on it. Going after you would be going after me, and he's not ready for that war." Adrian leaned against his desk. "But yes, your background is known now. That changes the dynamic." "How?" "It makes you more interesting to certain people. They'll want to understand why I'd take on Richard Hart's debt and his daughter. They'll speculate, create narratives." His gray eyes were serious. "Some will assume you're more to me than you are. Let them. It's protective coloring." Lena processed that, the implications settling like stones. "You're using me as a decoy." "I'm using the situation to create strategic ambiguity. There's a difference." Adrian pushed off from the desk. "We should return to the party. Hiding makes you look weak." He was right. But it took everything Lena had to walk back into that room full of predators. Adrian stayed close, his presence a clear signal of protection and possession. The rest of the evening passed without incident. Dmitri left early, his point made. The other guests gradually filtered out, offering thanks and pleasantries that masked the calculated nature of every interaction. By midnight, the house was quiet again. Lena stood in her bathroom, removing makeup with shaking hands. She'd survived her first real glimpse into Adrian's world, the polished surface and the violence lurking beneath. A knock at her door made her jump. "Miss Hart," Margaret's voice. "May I come in?" Lena opened the door to find the older woman holding a tea tray. "I thought you might need this," Margaret said gently. "First real dinner party is always intense." They sat in the sitting area of Lena's room, drinking chamomile tea, and for the first time, Lena felt the careful composure she'd maintained all evening crack. "Is it always like that?" she asked quietly. "That dangerous?" "Sometimes. Adrian's world is complex. He's built something rare, a criminal organization that operates through negotiation rather than violence. But that doesn't mean violence isn't always an option." Margaret set down her cup. "He's ruthless when he needs to be. But he's also fiercely protective of the people under his care. You saw that tonight. Dmitri was testing him through me, and Adrian shut it down immediately. That sends a message. You're not available as leverage or a target. It's protection, even if it feels complicated." Lena thought about Adrian's hand at her back, the cold authority in his voice when he'd dismissed Dmitri's provocation. Protection, yes, but also ownership. "I don't know how to feel about any of this," she admitted. Margaret smiled sadly. "You don't have to know right now. Just survive it, learn from it, and become whoever you need to be to thrive here. That's all anyone can do." After Margaret left, Lena stood at her window, looking out over the dark grounds. Somewhere in the house, Adrian was probably still working, processing the evening's interactions, planning his next moves. She thought about the girl who'd signed that contract 2 weeks ago. Terrified, angry, powerless. That girl was already gone, replaced by someone harder, sharper, more aware of the dangerous currents that shaped this world. In 3 years and 50 weeks, she'd walk away from this with her freedom, her education, and $500,000. But she was beginning to understand she'd leave with something else too. Knowledge of how power really worked, how dangerous people operated, how to survive and thrive in spaces most people never even knew existed. Whether that was corruption or education depended on your perspective. Lena was no longer sure which she believed. Classes started on a Monday morning, thick with fog that clung to the UCLA campus like a shroud. Lena stepped out of the black SUV with her backpack slung over one shoulder, feeling Marcus's presence behind her like a shadow she couldn't shake. "I'll be in the student union," he said quietly. "Text when you're between classes. And Miss Hart, remember what we practiced. Awareness first." She nodded and walked toward Royce Hall, willing herself to move like she belonged here. Like she was just another student returning for the semester, not a woman whose freedom had been signed away to pay debts she'd never incurred. Her first class was political theory with Professor Hendricks, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a reputation for dismantling lazy arguments. The lecture hall filled quickly, students comparing summer adventures, complaining about textbook costs, existing in a world Lena had been exiled from. She chose a seat in the middle, not too eager, not too withdrawn, pulled out her laptop and waited. "Welcome back, and welcome to those joining us for the first time," Professor Hendricks commanded the room without raising her voice. "This semester we'll be examining power structures, how they're built, maintained, and challenged. We'll start with Machiavelli's The Prince, which I'm sure most of you think you understand. I promise you don't." Lena found herself leaning forward, engaged despite everything. Machiavelli had been on Adrian's bookshelf. She'd noticed it that night in the library. Was that intentional? Had he anticipated she'd be studying this? The lecture flew by. Professor Hendricks dissected the text with surgical precision, drawing parallels to modern power dynamics that made several students shift uncomfortably. When she dismissed them, Lena felt energized in a way she hadn't since before her father's betrayal. Her phone buzzed. "Marcus." "How was class?" "Good. Heading to economics next." The day continued in a blur of syllabi and introductions. By the time she met Marcus in the student union at 4, Lena's head was swimming with reading assignments and paper deadlines. "You look happier," Marcus observed as they walked to the SUV. "I forgot what it felt like. To learn something because I wanted to, not because someone was forcing me." She paused. "Thank you for giving me space. I know you were close by, but it didn't feel suffocating." That's the balance Adrian wants. Protection without imprisonment. Marcus opened the door for her. How he treats you sets the tone for how everyone else in his organization sees you. Respect flows downward. During the drive back to the estate, Lena stared out the window, processing the day. She'd survived her first return to normal life, or the appearance of it. Her classmates had no idea who she really was, what her circumstances were. To them, she was just Lena, a transfer student getting her degree. The anonymity was intoxicating. At the estate, she found Adrian in his office, door open for once. He glanced up from his computer when she knocked. "How was your first day?" "Challenging. Good." Lena hesitated in the doorway. "Professor Hendricks assigned the prints. I noticed you have a copy." "I have several copies in different translations. The nuances matter." Adrian gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit. Tell me what you think Machiavelli got right." It wasn't what she'd expected. Lena sank into the chair, her mind scrambling. He understood that power requires both fear and respect, that being loved is less reliable than being feared, but being hated is dangerous. "And you think that's accurate?" "I think you believe it is. You've structured everything here around respect and consequences, not affection." The words came out before she could stop them. "People fear disappointing you more than they fear punishment." Adrian leaned back, studying her with those unreadable gray eyes. "Go on." "Margaret works herself to exhaustion because she respects your standards. David pushes me harder than he probably should because he wants to prove his teaching is effective. Marcus takes his protection duties seriously because failure would mean losing your trust." Lena met his gaze. "You've created a system where the worst punishment is falling short of your expectations. That's pure Machiavelli." Something that might have been approval flickered across Adrian's face. "And what does that tell you about how to navigate this world?" "That competence is currency. That my value here isn't about being liked. It's about being useful, reliable, excellent at what I do." She paused. "That you'll protect me as long as I maintain my worth." "Partially correct." Adrian stood and moved to the window, hands in his pockets. "I'll protect you because you're under my authority, regardless of your performance. That's what protection means. It's not conditional on constant perfection. But you're right that competence determines your role, your influence, your future opportunities." Lena processed that distinction. "So you separate protection from advancement." "Always. Conflating the two creates situations where people accept abuse because they think survival requires it." He turned to face her. "I'm many things, Miss Hart, but I'm not interested in breaking people. Transformation? Yes. Destruction? No." The conversation felt dangerously honest, like they'd stepped outside their formal roles for a moment. Lena wasn't sure what to do with it. "I have reading to do," she said finally. 3 chapters of Machiavelli and a statistics problem set. "But then don't let me keep you. Dinner is at 7 if you want to join me. If not, Margaret will send something to your room." Lena chose her room, needing space to think. The day had been disorienting. The normalcy of campus life crashed against the reality of her circumstances. She was living a double existence now, student by day, indentured servant by night. Except servant wasn't quite right. Adrian's household ran more like a corporation, with her as an executive in training. The language mattered. The framing shaped everything. Over the next 3 weeks, Lena fell into a rhythm that felt almost sustainable. Wake early, breakfast with Margaret, morning household coordination, afternoon classes, evening study sessions. Marcus's security training had shifted to twice weekly. Apparently she'd progressed faster than expected. "You're a natural at this," he said during a session focused on situational awareness. "Most people take months to develop the kind of threat assessment you're doing instinctively now." "I spent my entire childhood reading my father's moods to avoid his temper. This isn't that different." Lena dodged his mock attack and countered with the palm strike he'd taught her. "Just broader application." "Fair point." Marcus stepped back. "You ready for scenario training?" "What's that?" "Real-world situations. How to handle being followed. What to do if someone tries to force you into a vehicle. Escape techniques under pressure." He grinned at her expression. "Don't worry, we start small." The scenario training was intense. Marcus had recruited 2 other security staff to play aggressors, creating situations that felt terrifyingly real. The first time someone grabbed her from behind, Lena froze completely. "Again," Marcus said. "Don't think, react." They ran the scenario 5 times. By the 5th, Lena's elbow connected with her attacker's solar plexus hard enough to make him grunt, and she'd extracted herself and run to the designated safe point. "Better," Marcus approved. "Your instinct is still to negotiate. Break that." In a real threat situation, you fight first, think later. On campus, Lena was discovering she'd become something of an enigma. She showed up to every class prepared, participated thoughtfully, but never joined study groups or accepted invitations to parties. Marcus's discreet presence had been noticed, spawning theories ranging from witness protection to minor celebrity. "So what's your deal?" a girl named Cassidy asked after political theory one day. "You're too put together to be a normal student, and that guy who picks you up is definitely security." Lena had prepared for this. "Family business. My employer values education, but also discretion. The security is precautionary." "Employer? You work while going to school?" "Executive assistant position? It's complicated." Cassidy seemed to accept that, backing off with the wariness people show around money and power they don't fully understand. Lena hated lying, but recognized it as necessary. The truth, that she'd been traded to settle gambling debts, would raise questions she couldn't answer. In Professor Hendrick's class, they'd moved from Machiavelli to Hannah Arendt, examining power versus violence. The professor had a habit of cold-calling students for their interpretations. "Miss Hart." Professor Hendrick's eyes locked on her. "Arendt argues that power and violence are opposites. Where violence rules absolutely, power is absent. Thoughts?" Lena stood, her mind racing. "I think she's distinguishing between coercion and authority. Violence is what you use when you've lost the ability to command through legitimate power. It's admission of weakness, not strength." Interesting. Apply that to a modern context. A leader who rules through fear and brutality has no real power, just the temporary ability to inflict harm. But a leader who commands respect and loyalty, who creates systems people invest in maintaining, has genuine power that sustains even without their direct presence. Professor Hendricks nodded slowly. "You're describing the difference between tyranny and authority." "Good. Sit." That evening, Lena recounted the exchange to Adrian during one of their increasingly frequent dinners together. "Arendt was right," he said, cutting into his steak with precise movements. "Violence is expensive and unstable. True power is when people follow your direction because they believe in the system you've built, not because they're afraid of immediate consequences. Is that what you've done? Built a system people believe in? I've built a system that rewards competence and punishes betrayal predictably. People stay because the alternatives are worse and the benefits are better than they'd find elsewhere." Adrian's gray eyes met hers. "I'm not interested in loyalty through terror. I want loyalty through rational self-interest." "That's very cold." "It's honest. I prefer honest transactions to false sentiment." He paused. "How are you finding the balance? School and household duties?" "Manageable, though I haven't had much time for anything else." "That's by design initially, but you should have some space for yourself. What would you do with free time if you had it?" The question caught her off guard. "I don't know. I haven't thought about it." "Think about it. Burnout helps no one, and I need you sustainable long-term." Adrian returned his attention to his meal. "Take Sunday afternoons. No household duties, no formal obligations. Use the time however you want." "Just like that?" "Just like that. Though I'd suggest you spend some of it in the library. You never finished the Angelou collection I gave you." Lena had forgotten about it, buried under coursework and training. "I'll read it this Sunday." "Good." Adrian stood, signaling the end of dinner. "One more thing. There's a charity gala next Saturday. I need you there as my companion. David will brief you on the attendees and appropriate conversation topics." Another performance. Another opportunity to practice navigating my world. "You did well at the dinner party, despite Dimitri's provocation. This will be easier, more public, more controlled." He moved toward the door. "Formal dress. Margaret already has options for you." After he left, Lena sat alone with her wine glass, thinking about power and violence, control and consent. Adrian's world operated on principles that should have repulsed her. Yet somehow she found herself not just adapting, but engaging, even thriving. Was that survival or Stockholm Syndrome? She genuinely didn't know anymore. Sunday afternoon, she curled up in the library with the Angelou collection. The poetry hit differently now. Words about resilience and self-definition and rising above circumstances designed to crush you. Lena read Still I Rise 3 times, feeling something crack open in her chest. Had her mother read this? Had she understood on some level that marrying Richard Hart meant choosing a cage, however gilded? The door opened quietly. Adrian entered, looking more relaxed than usual in dark jeans and a sweater. He selected a book from the philosophy section before noticing her. Finding it relevant? He asked, gesturing to the Angelou. Painfully so. Lena closed the book. Did you give this to me because you thought I'd relate, or because you wanted me to? Both. You needed to see that transformation is possible, that circumstances don't define outcomes. Adrian settled into one of the leather chairs. Also because Angelou understood something most people miss, that dignity is a choice you make regardless of external conditions. That's easy to say when you're the one with all the power. I grew up with nothing. The admission came quietly. Foster care, group homes, streets. When those fell through, I built everything you see through strategic thinking and refusing to accept that my starting point determined my destination. He met her eyes. I'm not comparing our situations, but I understand what it means to be powerless and to decide that's unacceptable. Lena had never heard him reference his past before. How old were you when you decided? 15. A social worker told me I'd end up dead or in prison by 20, that kids like me didn't have other options. Adrian's expression was distant. I spent that night in a library, reading everything I could find about how power actually works. Decided I'd rather build an empire than inherit one. And here we are. Here we are, Lena echoed. You controlling a criminal organization, me serving out a contract to pay my father's debts. Success stories all around. You're not serving out anything. You're building something. He stood. The difference matters. One is passive victimhood. The other is active transformation. He left her alone with the poetry and his unexpected vulnerability. Lena sat in the quiet library, surrounded by books and autumn light, trying to reconcile the man who'd bought her with the man who'd just shared pieces of his history. The gala arrived faster than she wanted. Margaret helped her dress in a floor-length emerald gown that somehow made her look elegant and dangerous simultaneously. Hair swept up, minimal jewelry except for the same silver bracelet from the dinner party. You look like you belong in that world now, Margaret said approvingly. Not like someone playing dress-up. In the SUV, Adrian reviewed the guest list. Senator Morrison will be there. He's mostly legitimate, but takes donations from questionable sources. Don't discuss politics with him. Catherine Zhang runs several non-profit foundations that are actually money laundering operations. Be polite but vague if she asks about your background. Victor Constantine will likely attend. You remember him from the dinner party. The one who asked if I was special? He'll push that angle again, deflect with humor if possible, ice if necessary. Adrian's eyes were serious. This event will have media coverage. Photos may appear in society pages. You comfortable with that? Lena hadn't considered it. Her face in newspapers, identified as Adrian Voss's companion. What would her former classmates think? Her father? Does it matter if I'm comfortable? Yes. If you're truly not okay with it, we'll adjust. I can attend alone. The consideration surprised her. No, I'll be fine. It's just strange to think about being visible that way. You'll be visible as someone in my inner circle. That has protective value. Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. Change of plans. We need to make a stop first. What kind of stop? The kind where you stay in the vehicle with Marcus and don't ask questions. They drove to an industrial area near the port, warehouses and shipping containers, everything painted in shadows. Adrian disappeared into a building with 2 security personnel, leaving Lena in the SUV with Marcus. This is normal? She asked after 10 minutes. Depends on your definition of normal. Adrian's businesses require occasional on-site attention. Marcus's eyes never stopped scanning their surroundings. Nothing to worry about. But 20 minutes later, when Adrian emerged, his expression was darker than she'd ever seen it. He climbed into the SUV without a word, and they drove in tense silence toward the gala venue. Is everything all right? Lena finally asked. No, but it will be handled. Adrian's jaw was tight. When we arrive, I need you to be particularly attentive tonight. Watch who approaches me, who seems interested in you. Note anything unusual. You think something's going to happen? I think information is valuable, and you're in a position to observe without drawing attention. He looked at her directly. Can you do that? Yes. The gala was held at a historic hotel downtown, the ballroom glittering with chandeliers and Los Angeles' powerful elite. Lena took Adrian's arm as they entered, hyper-aware of the cameras flashing, the speculative looks, the whispered conversations that stopped when they passed. Smile, Adrian murmured. You're supposed to be enjoying yourself. She pasted on an expression she hoped looked genuine. Around them, wealth and influence mingled with criminal enterprise and political corruption, all dressed in designer gowns and $1,000 suits. A string quartet played something classical and forgettable. Senator Morrison approached within minutes. Adrian, good to see you, and this must be the young lady I've heard about. Lena Hart, isn't it? Senator. Lena shook his hand. I followed your education reform proposals with interest. Have you? I didn't realize Adrian's companions were so politically engaged. The dismissal was subtle but clear. Lena felt Adrian tense beside her. Miss Hart is completing her degree in political science, Adrian said smoothly. Her insights on policy are considerably more nuanced than most of your colleagues in the Senate. Morrison's smile froze. Of course. My apologies, Miss Hart. I meant no offense. None taken. Lena's voice was ice wrapped in silk. Though I'd be curious to hear how you reconcile your education proposals with the recent budget cuts to public universities. Seems contradictory. Morrison's face reddened. Well, it's complicated. I'm sure it is. Thankfully, complexity is what makes political science interesting. She smiled sweetly. Excuse us, Senator. I believe Adrian promised me champagne. As they walked away, Adrian's hand at her back felt warmer than usual. That was well done. He was condescending. He was testing you, and you showed teeth. Good. Adrian snagged 2 champagne flutes from a passing waiter. Stay sharp. Catherine Zhang is approaching. Catherine was stunning, mid-40s, elegant in red silk, eyes that missed nothing. Adrian, darling, it's been too long. Her gaze shifted to Lena with laser focus. And you must be the mysterious Lena. I've heard such interesting things. All true, I'm sure, Lena said lightly. Are they? I heard you came to Adrian through your father's difficulties. How terribly awkward that must have been. The social knife slid between her ribs with practiced ease. Lena felt her composure waver, but Adrian's hand tightened almost imperceptibly at her back. A reminder, a support. Family situations are often complicated, Lena replied. But I found my current position quite rewarding. Adrian is an excellent mentor. I'm sure he is. Catherine's smile didn't reach her eyes. Though I wonder what exactly he's mentoring you in. His business interests are so diverse. Miss Hart is learning household management and business operations, Adrian said, his voice carrying an edge of warning. Nothing that would interest you, Catherine, given your focus on philanthropic endeavors. Of course. Catherine's attention shifted back to Adrian. We should discuss the Foundation's upcoming fundraiser. I'd love your input. Send the details to my office. We'll arrange a meeting. Adrian's dismissal was polite but absolute. Catherine drifted away, leaving Lena feeling exposed and off balance. She knows, Lena whispered, about my father, about the debt. She knows some version of events. Everyone here trades in information. It's currency as much as money. Adrian guided her toward a quieter corner. But knowing pieces isn't the same as understanding the whole picture. Let her speculate. The evening continued with similar exchanges, probing questions, veiled insults, power games played with smiles and champagne. Lena observed everything, noting who seemed too interested in her, who avoided Adrian entirely, who watched them with calculating eyes. Then, near midnight, she noticed something odd. A man in a server's uniform, moving through the crowd but never actually serving anyone. His attention kept returning to Adrian with an intensity that felt wrong. The server at 3 o'clock, she murmured to Adrian during a lull. Dark hair, thin build. He's watching you. Adrian's eyes flicked that direction without moving his head. Good catch. Marcus? Marcus appeared instantly. Adrian gave him a subtle signal, and Marcus moved to intercept the man. Within seconds, the fake server had been escorted out a side door so smoothly most guests never noticed. What was that about? Lena asked. Unclear yet. Could be surveillance. Could be something worse. Adrian's expression remained pleasant for the benefit of onlookers. We're leaving. Natural exit. Say you're tired from your class schedule. They made their goodbyes gracefully, Lena playing exhausted student perfectly. In the SUV, the atmosphere was tense. Talk to me, Adrian said into his phone, speaking to someone at the estate. What did Marcus find? Lena couldn't hear the response, but she watched Adrian's face grow colder. Secure the perimeter. Full lockdown protocol. We'll be there in 20 minutes. He ended the call and looked at Lena. The man you spotted was carrying a weapon and photographs of you. The words hit like ice water. Me? Why would... Because someone thinks hurting you is a way to hurt me. Adrian's voice was controlled fury. Marcus is questioning him now. We'll have answers soon. Lena's hands were shaking. She'd known intellectually that being associated with Adrian meant danger, but this was different. This was real, immediate, targeted. I'm sorry, Adrian said quietly. I should have anticipated this. Should have provided better security. You did provide security. I spotted him because of the training you insisted on. Lena forced herself to breathe steadily. What happens now? Now we find out who sent him and why. Then we make sure it doesn't happen again. He met her eyes. You're under my protection, Lena. That means something. Anyone who comes after you comes after me. The SUV raced through dark streets toward the estate. Lena stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past, and understood with sudden clarity that her life had irrevocably changed. She wasn't just serving out a contract anymore. She was a piece on Adrian Voss's chessboard, valuable enough that his enemies thought capturing her was worth the risk. The question was whether that made her more protected or more endangered. The question was whether she'd survive long enough to see that empire built. The drive back to the estate was tense. Adrian made 3 phone calls in rapid succession, his voice clipped and controlled, issuing orders Lena couldn't fully parse. Marcus drove with focused intensity, taking routes that seemed deliberately circuitous. Are we being followed? Lena asked quietly. Not anymore, Marcus replied. Lost them about 10 minutes ago. The casual confirmation that they had been followed sent ice through her veins. This wasn't theoretical danger anymore. Someone had actively tracked their movements, waited for an opportunity, sent an armed man to a public event. At the estate, security had transformed from discreet to overt. Guards patrolled openly, weapons visible. The main entrance had been reinforced, and personnel Lena had never seen before manned checkpoints throughout the grounds. Stay in the main house, Adrian instructed as they entered. Don't go near windows. Marcus will be stationed outside your door. For how long? Until I neutralized the threat. He disappeared down the hallway toward his office, already back on the phone. Lena retreated to her room but couldn't settle. Her mind kept replaying the fake server's intense focus. The weight of knowing someone had been watching her, photographing her, planning. She pulled out her laptop and did something she'd been avoiding, searched for news about her father. The results were sparse but damning. Richard Hart had been spotted at various casinos in the weeks following her arrangement with Adrian, apparently continuing his gambling despite having nothing left to lose. There were rumors he'd borrowed money from new sources, people even more dangerous than the original creditors. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I know you think you're safe with Voss. You're not. He can't protect you forever. We need to talk. This is your last chance to come home willingly. Lena's hands shook as she read it. Her father. Somehow he'd gotten a new number, circumvented the no-contact provisions of the contract. She forwarded the message to Adrian immediately, then to Marcus. Within minutes, both men were at her door. When did this come in? Adrian demanded, his gray eyes cold with fury. Just now. I forwarded it immediately. Marcus was already tracing the number. Burner phone, probably already disposed of. But the message is clear. He's escalating. The hired man at the gala, Adrian said slowly, piecing it together. That wasn't about leverage or renegotiation. That was an actual abduction attempt. He was planning to take you somewhere I couldn't reach. The realization settled like lead. He wanted me back. Not to protect me, to use me, or to punish you for choosing me over him. Adrian's expression was grim. Either way, he's crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. What are you going to do? Find him, tonight. and make absolutely certain he never threatens you again. Adrian pulled out his phone. Marcus, I want every resource we have on Richard Hart's location. Check his known associates, the casinos, the underground betting rooms. Someone knows where he is. On it, Marcus left immediately. Lena and Adrian stood in her doorway, the comfortable partnership of recent months replaced by the stark reality of the danger she'd been living in. I should have seen this coming, Adrian said quietly. Should have anticipated he'd try something desperate. How could you know? He signed the contract, accepted the terms. Because desperate men don't honor contracts. They find angles, exploit weaknesses, make reckless moves. He met her eyes. I got complacent. Assumed the legal framework would be enough. I was wrong. What happens when you find him? Adrian's silence was answer enough. I need to know, Lena pressed. What exactly are you planning to do to my father? I'm planning to eliminate a threat to someone under my protection. The method is less important than the result. Adrian, this isn't a negotiation, Lena. This isn't a teaching moment or a test of your principles. This is me doing what's necessary to keep you safe. His voice softened fractionally. I know he's your father, but he stopped acting like one the moment he signed that contract, and he forfeited any remaining consideration when he hired someone to abduct you. Lena wanted to argue, to find some alternative, some way that didn't end in violence. But the cold logic was inescapable. Her father had proven he wouldn't stop. Legal consequences hadn't deterred him. Distance hadn't protected her. The only permanent solution was the one Adrian was proposing. I can't ask you to do this, she said finally. You're not asking, I'm choosing. Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. We have a location. Stay here with the backup security detail. I'll be back before morning. Let me come with you. Absolutely not. He's my father. This is my situation. You should stay here where it's safe and let me handle the dangerous parts. That's what protection means. Adrian's tone brooked no argument. This isn't about your capability, Lena. It's about risk management. I won't put you in a situation where you could be hurt or used as leverage. He left before she could protest further. Lena heard the SUV pull away, carrying Adrian and Marcus and several other security personnel toward whatever confrontation awaited. The hours that followed were endless. Lena tried to read, to work, to do anything other than imagine what was happening. Margaret appeared around midnight with tea and quiet companionship. This isn't your first time waiting for him to come back from something dangerous, is it? Lena asked. No, though usually it's business conflicts, not personal protection situations. Margaret set down the tea service. He'll be careful. Adrian doesn't take unnecessary risks. What if my father hurts him? What if this goes wrong? Then Adrian has backup and contingency plans and more experience with violence than your father ever dreamed of. Margaret's voice was gentle but firm. Your father is a gambler and a coward. Adrian is a strategist who's survived worse than Richard Hart could imagine. The reassurance helped marginally. Lena drank her tea and tried not to watch the clock. At 4:37 a.m., she heard vehicles returning, rushed to the window despite instructions to stay away from them, needing to see. Adrian climbed out of the SUV, looking tired but unharmed. No blood, no visible injuries. He spoke briefly with Marcus, then headed toward the house. Lena met him in the entrance hall. Is it done? It's done. Adrian's expression was unreadable. Your father won't be a threat anymore. Is he? She couldn't quite form the question. Alive. For now. I gave him a choice. Adrian moved into his office, gesturing for her to follow. Once the door was closed, he continued. I found him in a flophouse downtown, exactly where my sources said he'd be. Confronted him about the abduction attempt, the threatening messages, all of it. What did he say? That you were his daughter and he had a right to protect you from people like me. That the contract was signed under duress and wasn't valid. That he'd do whatever it took to get you back. Adrian poured himself a drink. Whiskey, neat. He actually believed it. Convinced himself he was the hero in this story. Lena sank into a chair. What choice did you give him? Leave the city. Tonight. Get on a bus to anywhere at least 500 miles away and never come back. Never contact you. Never speak your name. Never even think about returning. Adrian took a long drink. Or I turn him over to the people he currently owes money to. About $300,000 to some very unpleasant individuals who don't accept payment plans. He chose to leave. He chose to live. Barely. But yes, he's on a bus to Phoenix as we speak, with enough money to survive for a month if he's careful. Adrian set down his glass. I also made it very clear what would happen if he ever came back. In detail. He understood. Lena tried to feel something, grief, relief, anger, found only exhaustion. So that's it? He's just gone? He's gone. The threat is neutralized. You're safe. Adrian studied her face. I know this isn't the resolution you might have wanted. What I wanted was a father who actually loved me, who would have protected me instead of using me. But that person never existed. Lena stood, suddenly needing to move. You did what was necessary. I understand that. Do you? Because if you need time to process, I need to sleep. And then I need to get back to my normal schedule. Classes start again Monday, and I have reading to catch up on. Adrian nodded slowly. All right, but Lena, if you need to talk about this, I'm available. I know, thank you. She moved toward the door, then paused. Adrian, did he ask about me? Not as a commodity or leverage, but actually ask how I was doing? The hesitation before Adrian answered told her everything. No, he asked what I was paying you, whether you were being compensated fairly for your services. He still sees you as a transaction. Lena absorbed that final confirmation. Then I'm glad he's gone. I hope Phoenix is everything he deserves. She left Adrian's office and returned to her room as dawn was breaking, crawled into bed and finally let herself cry. Not for her father, but for the relationship she'd never really had. For the little girl who'd tried so hard to earn love that was never going to be freely given. When the tears stopped, she felt hollowed out but clean, like a wound that had been festering for years had finally been lanced and could start healing properly. The next weeks brought a return to routine that felt almost aggressively normal. Classes resumed, and Lena threw herself into her studies with renewed focus. Professor Hendricks was covering power transitions and succession planning, which felt uncomfortably relevant. The question isn't just how you gain power, the professor said during one lecture. It's how you maintain it through changing circumstances, how you adapt when the foundations shift. Lena took detailed notes, thinking about how the foundations of her entire life had shifted. Her father gone, the immediate threat neutralized, her contract with Adrian suddenly more about choice than coercion. After class, Cassidy caught up with her. You okay? You've seemed distracted. Family stuff, it's resolved now, but it was intense for a while. The security situation? Yeah, but it's handled. Lena managed to smile. How's the semester treating you? They fell into easy conversation about assignments and campus gossip, the normalcy of it grounding. Cassidy didn't push for details, didn't demand explanations, just offered friendship without conditions. That evening, Lena found Adrian reviewing documents in his office. Do you have a minute? Always, come in. She settled into the chair across from his desk, the one that had become almost hers over the months. I've been thinking about the contract, now that the immediate threat is gone, now that my father isn't a factor anymore. What happens to our arrangement? Adrian leaned back, giving her his full attention. What do you want to happen? That's just it. I don't know. The original terms were based on his debt and my need for protection. Both of those have changed significantly. True. But the core agreement, your education, household training, the 5-year timeline, that's still valid if you want it to be. Adrian's expression was neutral. Or we can renegotiate, adjust terms based on current circumstances. Lena had been preparing for this conversation, but actually having it felt surreal. What if I wanted to leave? Just walk away, finish school on my own terms? Then you'd leave. I'd provide a settlement proportional to your time served, probably around $200,000 at this point, enough to finish your degree and start over wherever you wanted. He paused. Is that what you want? I don't know. Part of me thinks I should want that, should want complete independence, no ties to you or this arrangement or any of it. But I'm learning things here I wouldn't learn anywhere else, developing skills that matter, building towards something I couldn't achieve on my own. Lena met his eyes. And I'm not sure if that's legitimate opportunity or if I've just convinced myself to accept captivity. Those aren't mutually exclusive, Adrian said quietly. You can be here by choice and still be building something valuable. The question is whether the benefits outweigh the restrictions for you personally. How do I even evaluate that objectively? You're the one who taught me everything I know about strategic thinking. My framework for analyzing this situation came from you. Then let me offer a different perspective. Adrian stood and moved to the window. If you left tomorrow, what would you miss? Lena considered the question honestly. The structure, the challenge of meeting your standards, Margaret's mentorship, David's finance lessons, Marcus's security training. She paused. The sense that I'm becoming someone exceptional rather than just surviving. And what would you gain? Freedom from oversight. No more 9 a.m. check-ins or household duties or required dinner appearances. The ability to make choices without considering how they affect your operations or reputation. Sounds like you've already done the analysis. Intellectually, yes, but emotionally I'm still conflicted. Lena stood and joined him at the window. You've invested a lot in me. Time, money, training. Part of me feels obligated to stay and justify that investment. Obligation is the worst reason to stay. Adrian turned to face her. I made that investment because I saw potential worth developing. If you choose to leave and use that development elsewhere, the investment was still worthwhile. I'm not interested in keeping people through guilt or manufactured debt. Then what would make you want me to stay? If you genuinely believed this environment was helping you become who you want to be, if the restrictions felt like structure rather than imprisonment, if you saw the next few years here as opportunity rather than obligation. His gray eyes were serious. I can't make that determination for you, Lena. Only you know whether you're thriving or just surviving. The honesty was both helpful and frustrating. Lena wanted him to make the choice for her, to tell her what to do, but that would just be another form of abdication. Can I have time to think about it? Really think, not just react? Take whatever time you need. The contract doesn't expire for another 4 years regardless. This is about whether we continue on current terms or renegotiate. Adrian returned to his desk. For what it's worth, I'd prefer you stay. You've exceeded every expectation, and I think we're building something valuable together, but prefer isn't require. Lena left his office with more questions than answers. Over the next week, she paid attention to how she actually felt about her daily routine, noticed when the structure felt supportive versus constraining, tracked her emotional responses to Adrian's expectations and the household responsibilities. What she discovered surprised her. The 9 a.m. check-ins she'd initially resented had become anchoring points in her day. The household duties Margaret assigned weren't burdens, but opportunities to develop operational thinking. The dinner appearances with Adrian had evolved into genuine intellectual exchange she'd miss. Even the security restrictions, which should have felt oppressive, mostly just felt prudent. She'd seen enough of Adrian's world to understand the dangers were real. On Sunday afternoon, she was reading in the library when David found her. Got a minute? He asked. I wanted to discuss something. Of course. David settled into one of the leather chairs. Adrian mentioned you're reconsidering the contract terms, thinking about whether to stay. Did he ask you to talk to me? No, but I wanted to offer a perspective you might not have considered. David leaned forward. I've worked for Adrian for 6 years. Came to him straight out of business school, thinking I'd spend 2 years learning, then move to a legitimate firm. Know why I'm still here? Why? Because nowhere else would let me do what I do here. Adrian gives me complex problems, trusts my analysis, implements my recommendations. I'm 29 and running financial operations for a multi-million-dollar enterprise. That doesn't happen in traditional corporate structures. Lena saw where he was going. You're saying the unconventional setup creates unconventional opportunities. Exactly. Yes, there are restrictions. Yes, Adrian's standards are demanding, but I've learned more here than I would have in a decade somewhere else. David paused. I'm not saying you should stay, just that sometimes the most valuable growth happens in uncomfortable environments. After he left, Lena sat with that perspective. She'd been so focused on whether she was choosing to stay or just accepting captivity that she hadn't fully appreciated what staying would actually give her. That evening, she knocked on Adrian's office door. I've decided, she said without preamble, I want to stay. Not because I feel obligated or because I'm afraid to leave, but because I genuinely believe I'm building something here that matters. Adrian's expression showed what might have been relief. You're certain? As certain as I can be about anything, Lena sat down. But I do want to renegotiate some terms. I'm listening. I want more autonomy over my class schedule and study time. No required check-ins on days I have exams or major projects due. I want the freedom to develop social connections on campus without security constantly hovering. Marcus can be nearby, but not obviously following me. And I want actual vacation time, 2 weeks a year where I can go somewhere without it being a business function. Adrian considered, then nodded. Agreed on all counts. Anything else? Yes. I want transparency about the business operations. Not just the household management, but the actual work you do. If I'm going to be here, associated with your organization, I want to understand what I'm part of. That's a significant request. Information is dangerous in my world. I know, but I'm already a target because of my association with you. I'd rather understand the full picture than operate on partial knowledge. Adrian studied her face for a long moment. All right, I'll read you in on the operations, within reason. Some things remain need to know, but I'll give you a clear understanding of the business. Then we have a deal. We do. Adrian pulled up a document on his computer. I'll have David draft revised contract terms reflecting these changes. You'll review with your own lawyer before signing. My own lawyer? You're negotiating a complex agreement. You should have independent legal counsel. He met her eyes. I'm serious about this being a genuine choice, Lena. That means making sure you have proper representation. The gesture was unexpected and appreciated. Thank you. Over the following weeks, the revised contract took shape. Lena met with the lawyer Adrian had recommended, a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in employment contracts and didn't bat an eye at the unusual circumstances. This is actually quite favorable, the lawyer said after reviewing the terms. The autonomy provisions are clear, the compensation is generous, and the exit terms are well defined. I'd recommend signing. With the new contract finalized, Lena's life shifted into a different gear. Adrian began including her in business discussions she'd previously been excluded from, not the illegal operations, but the strategic thinking behind them. How he assessed risks, developed contingency plans, managed complex networks of relationships. The shipping business is cover for moving information, he explained one evening. We transport legitimate cargo, but the real value is in the intelligence we gather about what's moving where. The data gets sold to people who need to know shipping patterns, customs schedules, security vulnerabilities. That's how you've stayed under the radar. Nothing overtly criminal, just information brokerage. Exactly. Violence attracts attention from law enforcement. Information trading is harder to prosecute and more profitable long-term. Lena absorbed it all, fitting pieces together. Adrian had built an empire on strategic thinking and relationship management, not brutality. It was still illegal, but in ways she could rationalize. Campus life also improved with the revised terms. Marcus maintained his protective watch, but from a greater distance, giving Lena space to develop actual friendships. She joined a study group for her political theory class, attended campus events, started to feel like a real student rather than someone playing a role. Professor Hendricks pulled her aside after class one day. Your last paper was exceptional. Have you considered graduate school? I haven't really thought beyond finishing my bachelor's degree. Well, start thinking. With your analytical skills and unique perspective on power structures, you'd excel in a doctoral program. The professor handed her a card. I know several programs that would be lucky to have you. Consider it. The idea planted itself in Lena's mind. Graduate school. A future beyond the contract, built on competence and credentials. It was the first time she'd really let herself imagine what came after. That evening, she mentioned it to Adrian during dinner. Political science PhD? He considered. That's a 7-year commitment, minimum. You'd be well into your 30s before completion. Is that a problem? Not for me, but it's a significant life choice for you. Adrian cut into his steak thoughtfully. What would you do with a doctorate? I don't know yet. Teach, maybe, research, consulting for organizations that need to understand complex power dynamics. She paused. Or work for you in a more strategic capacity. That last option interests me. Someone with advanced training in political theory and systems analysis could be invaluable to the business. Adrian met her eyes. But I'd want you to make that choice based on genuine interest, not obligation to justify my investment. What if it's both? I'm genuinely interested, and I also see how it could benefit our working relationship. Then we'd structure it properly. Educational support in exchange for a commitment to work with me for a defined period after completion. Standard arrangement. Lena felt something shift. This wasn't the contract her father had forced her into. This was an actual career discussion, planning for a future she was actively building. Let me finish my bachelor's first. Then we'll talk seriously about next steps. Agreed. The semester progressed. Lena's grades were excellent. Her household management responsibilities were expanding as Margaret gradually transitioned toward retirement, and her understanding of Adrian's business operations deepened. She also started to understand the real cost of being associated with him. Some of her classmates avoided her once they figured out who she worked for. A professor made a pointed comment about questionable associations during a discussion of corruption. At a campus event, someone muttered, "Crime boss's pet," just loud enough for her to hear. Lena learned to ignore it, to build a shell against judgment from people who didn't understand her circumstances. But it stung nonetheless. Marcus found her in the library late one night, clearly upset about something. "You okay, Miss Hart?" Define okay. She closed her book. "Do you ever regret working for Adrian? Regret the associations, the judgment, all of it?" Marcus settled into a chair across from her. "Every job has costs. This one gives me purpose, challenges me, pays well, and lets me protect people who need it. The judgment from outsiders is just noise." "But doesn't it bother you, being looked at like you're a criminal?" "I am a criminal by legal definition. I've broken laws in service of Adrian's operations. I'm at peace with that because I believe what we do is less harmful than many legal enterprises." He leaned forward. "You're struggling because you're still measuring yourself against conventional standards. Stop. Build your own value system based on your actual experiences, not what society says you should feel." The advice was blunt but helpful. Lena had been trying to reconcile her life with normal expectations when nothing about her situation was normal. How do I do that? Build my own value system? Start by asking what actually matters to you. Not what should matter, but what does. Then build from there. After Marcus left, Lena pulled out her journal and wrote what actually mattered to her. She listed competence, growth, being valued for her contributions, having agency over her life, building something meaningful, safety, intellectual challenge. Every single item on her list was being met in her current situation. The restrictions that came with it, the security, the oversight, the association with Adrian's world, were costs she was willing to bear for those benefits. The realization settled something inside her. She wasn't trapped. She was choosing this, eyes open, understanding both the benefits and the costs. 3 months later, Lena finished her final exams for the semester with strong grades across all her classes. She was officially halfway through her bachelor's degree, on track to graduate on schedule. Adrian took her to dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown to celebrate, their first time leaving the estate together for purely social reasons. "You've come a long way from that terrified girl in the penthouse," he said over wine. "That girl was 9 months ago. Feels like a lifetime." "In many ways it was. You've rebuilt yourself completely." Adrian raised his glass. "To transformation, to choosing growth over comfort, to excellent teachers and high standards." Lena clinked her glass against his. "I wouldn't have made it this far without both." They ate in comfortable conversation, discussing everything from campus politics to business strategy to books they'd both read recently. The dynamic between them had evolved into something that felt almost like friendship, though with clear professional boundaries maintained. As they left the restaurant, Lena noticed a man watching them from across the street. Her training with Marcus kicked in. She assessed the threat level, noted his position, calculated escape routes. "You see him," Adrian observed. "East side, dark jacket, focused on us. Should we be concerned?" "Marcus already has him marked. Just someone curious about why I'm having dinner with a beautiful young woman. Probably thinks you're a romantic interest." "Let them speculate. We know the truth." But as they drove back to the estate, Lena caught her reflection in the window and barely recognized herself. Poised, confident, comfortable navigating Adrian's complex world. The transformation was complete in ways she couldn't have imagined 9 months ago. She'd entered his world broken and desperate. She was becoming someone formidable. And the journey was far from over. The estate was ablaze with security lights when they arrived, transforming the elegant grounds into something that looked more like a military installation. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, and every entrance was manned by personnel Lena had never seen before. Marcus met them at the door, his expression grim. "He's in the basement, won't talk yet, but we found something interesting." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Show me." "Wait." Lena grabbed his arm without thinking. "What are you going to do to him?" Adrian looked at her hand on his sleeve, then at her face. "Get answers. By whatever means necessary." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer you're getting tonight." He gently removed her hand. "Go to your room. Lock the door. Don't come out until I send for you." "Adrian, this isn't negotiable, Lena. You're safe here, but I need to handle this without worrying about you." His eyes softened fractionally. "Please, trust me on this." She wanted to argue, to demand transparency, to insist on knowing everything, but the steel in his voice told her this was a line she couldn't cross. "Not tonight." "Fine, but I want answers tomorrow." "You'll have them." Lena went to her room, but sleep was impossible. She paced the floor, adrenaline still coursing through her system, jumping at every sound. Someone had targeted her, had photographs of her, had come to that gala with a weapon and intentions she didn't want to imagine. Around 3 a.m., her phone buzzed. A text from Adrian. "We have answers. Sleep if you can. We'll talk in the morning." She didn't sleep, just lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, replaying the evening. The fake server's intense focus on Adrian. The weight of the photographs in his pocket. The cold calculation required to plan an attack at a public event. When dawn finally broke, Lena gave up pretending and showered. Dressed in jeans and a sweater, armor of normalcy, made her way downstairs to find Margaret already in the kitchen, though her usual warmth was strained. "Coffee?" Margaret offered. "Please." Lena accepted the mug gratefully. "Is he in his office, waiting for you?" Margaret's hand briefly touched Lena's shoulder. "It's going to be all right, dear. Mr. Voss doesn't let threats go unanswered." That's what worried her. Adrian's office door was open. He sat behind his desk, looking like he hadn't slept at all, his shirt wrinkled and tie abandoned. When Lena entered, he gestured to the chair across from him. "Close the door." She obeyed and sat, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "Tell me everything." "The man at the gala was hired by your father." The words hung in the air like suspended glass, waiting to shatter. Lena's mind went blank, then filled with static. "What?" "Richard Hart hired someone to abduct you from the gala. The plan was to take you somewhere he could access, use you as leverage to renegotiate the terms of his debt transfer." Adrian's voice was flat, factual, devastating. "He's been planning this for weeks. The photographs were surveillance, your routes, your schedule, locations where you're vulnerable." Lena couldn't breathe. Her father, the man who'd already sold her once, had tried to kidnap her back. "How, sir?" Her voice cracked. "How do you know it was him?" "The man we caught had text messages, payment records, detailed instructions, all traceable back to your father." Adrian pulled up his tablet and turned it toward her. "I can show you the evidence if you need to see it." "No." She didn't want to see her father's words planning her abduction. Didn't want that confirmation of just how little she meant to him. "What did you do to the man you caught?" Questioned him, thoroughly, then turned him over to people who'll ensure he never works in this city again. Adrian's eyes were hard. "He's not your concern. Your father is." "What are you going to do to him?" "That depends on you." Lena stared at him. "On me?" "This is your situation, your father, your trauma." Adrian stood and moved to the window, hands in his pockets. "I can handle this several ways. I can make him disappear, quietly, permanently, no trace. I can destroy him financially and socially, leave him alive but broken. Or I can let the legal system handle it, provide evidence to authorities that he hired someone to commit a felony." "You're asking me to choose?" "I'm giving you agency in a situation where you've had none." He turned to face her. "You've spent your entire life as his victim. First as a daughter, he neglected and controlled. Then as a commodity, he traded away. Now as a target for his desperate schemes. This ends here, Lena, but how it ends is your decision." The power of that choice felt crushing. Lena's hands trembled in her lap. Part of her wanted him gone, vanished, erased, unable to hurt her ever again. Another part, the part that remembered being 6 years old and held when she'd had nightmares, recoiled from that finality. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow morning. After that, I make the call based on what's best for your security. Adrian returned to his desk. There's something else you need to know. How could there possibly be more? Your father didn't just target you. He's been spreading information about our arrangement, telling people you're being held against your will, that I'm keeping you prisoner. He's building a narrative that positions him as the concerned father trying to rescue his daughter. Rage, hot and pure, flooded through her.
That's insane. He's the one who sold me. I know, but he's gambling that public perception matters more than truth. If he can paint himself as the victim and me as the villain, he thinks it creates leverage. Adrian's expression was calculating, which is why the legal route might be most effective. Let him tell his story in court, under oath, where his lies become perjury and the contract becomes evidence. Lena stood, needing to move, to think. He tried to have me kidnapped.
He's lying to anyone who'll listen. And you're giving me the choice of what happens to him? Yes. Why? You could just handle this however you wanted. I'm under contract to you. You don't need my permission. No, I don't. Adrian met her eyes. But I'm trying to give you something your father never did. Actual power over your own life. The contract ends in less than 5 years. What happens after depends on the person you become during that time. Victim or victor. Powerless or empowered. This is part of that transformation. She wanted to hate him for making her choose, for putting this weight on her shoulders. But she understood what he was doing, forcing her to claim her own agency, to stop being acted upon and start acting. I need air. I need to think. Take Marcus with you if you go beyond the immediate grounds. I know the rules. The words came out sharper than intended. I'll be in the garden. Outside, the morning was crisp and clear, at odds with the chaos in her mind. Lena walked the manicured paths past perfectly trimmed hedges and artfully placed sculptures, trying to process the impossible. Her father had tried to have her abducted. After selling her, after signing that contract, after promising to stay away, he'd hired someone to take her back, not out of love or regret, out of desperation and greed. The realization settled like lead in her stomach. He would never change, would never be the father she'd needed him to be. That man, if he'd ever existed, was gone. She found herself at a stone bench overlooking the city below. Sat down and pulled out her phone. There were messages, classmates asking about assignments, David sending additional reading materials, Cassidy inviting her to a study group. Normal life. The life she was building alongside this nightmare. Lena opened her photos and scrolled back to pictures from before. Her father at her high school graduation, arm around her shoulders, both of them smiling. Her father at dinner on her 20th birthday, raising a toast. Moments that had felt real at the time, but now seemed like performances. Had he ever actually loved her, or had she always been just a resource to him, something to use when convenient? The grief that washed over her was unexpected and overwhelming. Not for what she'd lost, but for what she'd never actually had. The father she'd imagined, the relationship she'd tried so hard to maintain, none of it had been real. She cried for the first time since that night in the penthouse. Sat on Adrian's garden bench and let herself break apart, all the rage and grief and betrayal pouring out until she was empty. When the tears finally stopped, something had shifted inside her. The girl who'd signed that contract desperate to save her father was gone. In her place was someone harder, clearer, done with self-deception. Lena pulled out her phone and called Adrian. I've decided, she said when he answered. Legal system. I want him in court, under oath, forced to tell the truth. I want a public record of what he did. And I want to be there when it happens. You're sure? Completely. He gets to live with the consequences of his choices. Just like I'm living with mine. I'll set it in motion. A pause. This won't be easy, Lena. Court proceedings, testimony, his lawyers trying to discredit you. I know. But I'm done hiding, done being ashamed of something he did to me. Her voice was steady now. And I want to go to class tomorrow. Normal schedule. I'm not letting him disrupt my life more than he already has. Agreed. Though security will be elevated until he's in custody. That's fine. Just get him, Adrian. Get him before he tries something else. Already in motion. The authorities will have him by tonight. After hanging up, Lena sat in the garden a while longer. The sun climbed higher, warming the air, indifferent to human drama. Somewhere in the city, her father was going about his day, not knowing that his schemes had been exposed, that his freedom had hours left. She should feel triumphant. Instead, she just felt tired. That evening, Adrian found her in the library trying to focus on her Machiavelli reading for class. "He's been arrested," Adrian said without preamble. "Conspiracy to commit kidnapping, extortion, violation of contract terms. His lawyer's already trying to negotiate, but the evidence is overwhelming." "Good." Lena closed her book. "What happens next?" "Arraignment tomorrow. Bail hearing. If the prosecutor does their job, he'll be denied bail given the nature of the charges." Adrian settled into the chair across from her. "You don't have to attend." "I want to. I want him to see me there, to know I'm not afraid anymore." "Then Marcus will take you. I'll be there as well, though in a different capacity." They sat in silence for a moment. Finally, Lena asked the question that had been gnawing at her. "Did you know, before tonight? Did you suspect he might try something?" "I knew he was the type to try. That's why the security training, the restrictions, the protocols." Adrian's gaze was steady. "I didn't know specifically about the gala plan until Marcus interrogated the hired man. But I've been monitoring your father since the contract was signed. People like him don't accept defeat gracefully." "You could have told me. Would it have helped? Or would it have just added to your burden?" He leaned forward slightly. "I made a judgment call. Maybe the wrong one. But I was trying to let you build a new life without constantly looking over your shoulder at the old one." Lena understood the logic, even as it frustrated her. "I'm not a child who needs protection from hard truths." "No, you're not. I'll remember that going forward." The arraignment was held in a downtown courthouse, all fluorescent lights and institutional gray. Lena sat in the gallery with Marcus beside her, watching as her father was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. The confident charm he'd always wielded like a weapon was gone, replaced by barely concealed panic. When his eyes found her in the crowd, something flickered across his face. Hope, maybe, that she'd come to support him. Lena's expression remained neutral, cold. She watched as the charges were read, as his lawyer entered a plea of not guilty, as the prosecutor outlined the evidence. "Your Honor," the prosecutor argued, "Mr. Hart hired a man to abduct his own daughter from a public event. He has a history of gambling debts and unstable behavior. He poses a clear flight risk and a danger to his victim. The people request he be held without bail." The defense attorney, expensive, clearly hired with money Richard didn't have, tried to argue. "My client is a concerned father who made poor choices while under emotional duress. He has ties to the community, no prior criminal record. He signed a legal contract transferring custody and contact rights," the prosecutor interrupted, "then systematically violated that contract while plotting a felony. This isn't a concerned father. This is a dangerous, desperate man." The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes, reviewed the evidence packet. "Bail is denied. Mr. Hart will remain in custody pending trial." Richard's face went white. "Your Honor, please, I can't. My daughter, Lena, she's being held against her will by Adrian Voss. I was trying to rescue her." "Mr. Hart," the judge's voice cut through his rambling, "you'll have an opportunity to present your defense at trial. Until then, you'll remain in county jail. Bailiff." As they led him away, Richard tried to catch Lena's eye, tried to communicate something, plea, accusation, manipulation. She looked right through him. He was a stranger wearing her father's face, someone who'd had 1,000 chances to be better and had chosen this instead. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered. Lena kept her head down, letting Marcus guide her through the crowd to the waiting SUV. Questions were shouted about her relationship with Adrian, about the charges, about whether she'd been held against her will. She answered none of them. In the vehicle, reaction finally set in. Her hands shook, her breathing came too fast. "You did good in there," Marcus said quietly. "Staying strong, not giving him anything." "I didn't feel strong. I felt numb." "Numb is better than broken. You'll process it later when it's safe." Back at the estate, Adrian was waiting. "How bad was it?" "Manageable." He tried to play the concerned father card. The judge wasn't buying it. Lena sank into a chair in his office. When's the trial? Probably 3 to 4 months. His lawyer will try to delay, but the prosecutor seems motivated. Adrian poured her water from the bar. You don't have to attend the trial. I can make sure you're updated without putting you through that. I'll decide when it gets closer. Lena accepted the water, but didn't drink. Can I ask you something? Always. Why did you really take on my father's debt? The truth, not the strategic explanation you gave me before. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, considering. Because I saw myself in you. Different circumstances, but the same fundamental situation. Someone with potential being destroyed by the person who should have protected them. He met her eyes. My foster father used to beat me for being smart. Said I was too clever for my own good, that I needed to learn my place. Sound familiar? My father never hit me. There are different ways to break people. Richard Hart destroyed you through neglect, manipulation, and ultimately betrayal. The method doesn't matter. The result is the same. Adrian's expression was unreadable. I took the debt because I thought I could give you something better, a chance to rebuild into someone your father's choices couldn't touch. And what do you get out of that, really? The satisfaction of proving that transformation is possible, that circumstances don't determine outcomes. He paused. And yes, eventually, a highly competent person running my household operations. I'm not selfless, Lena, but our interests align. It was the most honest he'd ever been with her. Lena found herself believing him in a way she hadn't quite allowed herself before. Thank you, she said quietly, for giving me the choice about how to handle him, for the training that let me spot the threat, for all of it, even the parts I resented. You're welcome. Now go rest. Tomorrow you have class, and Professor Hendricks doesn't accept my father's arraignment as an excuse for incomplete reading. Lena surprised herself by laughing. The sound felt foreign, but good. The next weeks blurred together. Classes, household training, security protocols, court updates. Her father's lawyer tried to get the charges reduced, but the evidence was damning. Text messages, payment records, the testimony of the man he'd hired. All of it pointed to premeditated conspiracy. On campus, Lena threw herself into her studies with renewed focus. Professor Hendricks' class had moved to exploring resistance movements and power challenges, which felt uncomfortably relevant. Miss Hart, the professor called on her during a discussion of civil disobedience. You've been quiet today. Thoughts on whether violent resistance is ever justified against oppressive power structures? Lena stood, her mind churning. I think violence is what people resort to when all legitimate channels have failed, but it's also what those in power use to delegitimize resistance. They point to the violence and ignore the oppression that caused it. You're describing a cycle. How does it break? When one side chooses a different path, either the oppressed find nonviolent methods that work, or those in power choose to reform before violence becomes inevitable. She paused, thinking of Adrian's philosophy. Or when power itself is restructured so it's based on consent and mutual benefit rather than coercion. Interesting. You're suggesting the answer is systemic change, not just resistance tactics. I'm suggesting that sustainable power requires buy-in from those being governed. Force is expensive and unstable. Systems that benefit participants last longer than systems that exploit them. Professor Hendricks smiled. Well articulated. Sit. After class, Cassidy caught up with her. That was intense. You okay? You seem different lately. Just processing some family stuff, Lena said carefully. It's been complicated. The security guy situation? Yeah, among other things. Cassidy studied her face. Look, I don't know what's going on with you, and you don't have to tell me. But if you need someone to just, be normal with for a few hours, I'm around. No questions asked. The offer touched something in Lena. For all the structure and security Adrian provided, she'd been isolated from normal social connections. Actually, that sounds good. There's a coffee place on campus, maybe after our next class? Deal. That small connection, that thread of normalcy, became an anchor. Cassidy never pried, never pushed, just offered friendship without demands. They studied together, complained about assignments, discussed nothing more serious than whether the dining hall pizza was edible. It reminded Lena that she was still 23 years old, still building a life beyond the contract and the court case and the complicated dynamic with Adrian. 3 months after her father's arrest, the trial date was set. Lena made the decision to attend opening statements but skipped the rest unless her testimony was needed. The courtroom was packed. Some genuine interested parties, some just drawn by the spectacle of Richard Hart's fall from grace. Adrian sat several rows behind her, present but not intrusive. The prosecutor painted a devastating picture. A father so consumed by gambling debts and desperation that he sold his daughter's freedom, then tried to steal it back when his scheme didn't pan out as expected. Evidence was presented methodically. The contract, the debt records, the surveillance photos, the text messages planning the abduction. Richard's lawyer tried to spin it as a misguided rescue attempt by a father concerned about his daughter's welfare. But when pressed on why that concern had only emerged after the debt transfer, why Richard had signed the contract in the first place, the narrative fell apart. During a recess, Lena stood in the hallway, needing air. Her father was led past in handcuffs, flanked by guards. He saw her and stopped. "Lena, please. You have to tell them the truth. That Voss is keeping you prisoner, that I was trying to help." "The truth?" She cut him off, her voice calm and clear. "The truth is you sold me to pay your gambling debts. You signed a contract giving up all parental rights and contact. Then you hired someone to kidnap me when you realized you couldn't manipulate the situation anymore." "That's not... I was trying to protect you. You were trying to protect yourself." Like always. Lena stepped closer, making sure he could see her eyes, her certainty. "I'm not your victim anymore, Dad. I'm not your commodity or your leverage or your rescue mission. I'm someone you don't get to control ever again." The bailiff moved to separate them. Richard's face contorted with rage and desperation. "You ungrateful little... I gave you everything. That penthouse, those schools. Everything you had was because of me." "No. Everything I had was despite you. And everything I am now is because I'm finally free of you." She turned to walk away, then looked back one last time. "I hope you get the full 20 years. You've earned it." She walked down the courthouse hallway with her head high, Marcus falling into step beside her. Behind her, her father's shouting faded to nothing. Adrian met her at the exit. "You all right?" "I will be." And she meant it. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Richard's defense crumbled under the weight of evidence. The jury took less than 3 hours to return a guilty verdict on all charges: conspiracy to commit kidnapping, extortion, violation of contract terms, and several related counts. At sentencing, the judge was unsparing. "Mr. Hart, you betrayed the most fundamental duty of a parent, to protect your child. Instead, you treated your daughter as property to be traded and then stolen back when it suited your purposes. Your actions were premeditated, calculated, and showed complete disregard for anyone's welfare but your own." Richard tried to speak, but the judge silenced him. "I'm sentencing you to 18 years in state prison, with possibility of parole after 12. Additionally, you're permanently barred from any contact with your daughter, directly or indirectly. If you attempt to circumvent this order, additional charges will be filed." 18 years? He'd be 65 when he got out, if he survived that long. Lena felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just a quiet sense of closure. This chapter was ending. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed again. This time, Lena had prepared a statement with Adrian's help. "My father made choices that hurt many people, myself included. Today, he faced the legal consequences of those choices. I'm grateful to the justice system for taking this seriously and to everyone who supported me through this process. I'm now focused on my education and my future. Thank you." Short, clean, offering nothing for speculation or sensationalism. In the SUV, Adrian handed her a folder. "What's this?" "Documents dissolving the contract, effective immediately. Your father's debt was the basis of our agreement. With him in prison and the debt satisfied through legal judgment, there's no longer a binding reason for you to stay." Lena stared at the papers, her heart suddenly pounding. "You're letting me go?" "I'm giving you a choice. The contract ends today if you want it to. You're free to leave with a settlement, not the full $500,000, but proportional to your time served. Enough to finish school and start over. Or you stay, not as a contract employee, but as an actual executive assistant with a real salary and benefits. You complete your degree while managing household operations, and when Margaret retires next year, you take over her position full-time." Adrian's gray eyes were serious. No coercion, no obligation, an actual job offer that you're free to refuse. Lena's hands trembled as she held the dissolution papers. Freedom. Real freedom. Not this conditional kind she'd been building toward, but immediate release from all obligations. She could walk away, go back to a normal life, finish school without the weight of Adrian's world on her shoulders. But what would she be walking away to? An apartment she'd have to find. Finances she'd have to manage alone. None of the structure and security and growth she'd experienced here. More than that, she'd be walking away from the person she'd become under Adrian's demanding standards. The competent, confident woman who could navigate dangerous social situations and manage complex operations and defend herself if needed. I need to think about it, she said finally. Take all the time you need. The offer doesn't expire. That evening, Lena sat in the library. Her library now, she'd started thinking of it, surrounded by books and the ghost of the girl who'd arrived here 6 months ago. So much had changed. She'd rebuilt herself from the foundation up, layer by layer, skill by skill. The structure she'd resented at first had become a framework she'd learned to navigate and even appreciate. And Adrian, the man who'd bought her freedom, had somehow given it back in ways her father never had. Margaret found her there around midnight. Can't sleep? Can't decide. Lena showed her the dissolution papers. He's giving me a choice. Margaret sat down, reading through the documents carefully. And what does your gut tell you? That I'm not ready to leave yet. That I have more to learn here, more to become. Lena paused. But I'm scared that if I stay, it's because I've developed some kind of dependency, Stockholm syndrome or whatever. Do you feel trapped? No. That's what's confusing. I feel challenged, pushed, like there's a version of myself I can only become by staying. Then that's not Stockholm syndrome. That's recognizing opportunity. Margaret's smile was warm. Adrian rebuilt himself from nothing. He sees that same potential in you. If you stay, it'll be because you choose growth over comfort. That's strength, not weakness. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm just making excuses to stay in a situation I understand instead of facing the unknown? What if you're right? What if walking away is just fear of success dressed up as independence? Margaret patted her hand. Either choice is valid, dear, but make sure you're choosing what you want, not what you think you should want. After Margaret left, Lena pulled out her journal, the one her mother had given her, flipped through entries from 6 months ago, full of fear and rage and desperate survival, compared them to recent entries about classroom debates and household management challenges and the satisfaction of mastering new skills. She wasn't the same person anymore. The question was whether that transformation was liberation or compromise. At dawn, Lena found Adrian in his office, already working despite the early hour. I've decided, she said from the doorway. He looked up, his expression neutral, but his attention complete. And? I'm staying. Not because of the contract, but because I'm not finished yet. She stepped into the office. I want to complete my degree. I want to take over Margaret's position. I want to keep learning everything you're willing to teach me. You're sure? You understand this means staying in my world with all its complications and dangers? I understand better than I did 6 months ago, and I choose it anyway. Lena met his eyes. But I have conditions. Adrian's eyebrow raised. Conditions? The salary you offered, I want it to be competitive with what an executive assistant with my skills would make anywhere else. I want clear advancement opportunities outlined in writing, and I want the freedom to walk away if circumstances change, with reasonable notice. A slow smile crossed Adrian's face, the first genuine one she'd seen from him. You've learned to negotiate. Well done. You taught me that everything is negotiation, benefits and costs clearly outlined. So I did. He pulled up a document on his computer. Here's what I'm offering. Review it, suggest changes, and we'll finalize tomorrow. Lena scanned the offer. The salary was generous, more than she'd expected. Benefits included continued security, housing, education support, and a clear path to household director when Margaret retired. This is fair, she said, surprised. I told you, I'm not interested in exploitation. I want competent people who choose to work with me because it benefits them. Adrian leaned back in his chair. You've exceeded every expectation I had, Lena. This is me investing in that continued growth. Then I accept.
pending minor adjustments to the vacation policy. Negotiate tomorrow. Right now, you should sleep. You've been up all night. Lena realized he was right. Exhaustion was setting in now that the decision was made. Thank you, Adrian, for everything, even the parts I hated at the time. You're welcome. Now go. Margaret's making breakfast at 7, and she'll be disappointed if you miss it. Over the next 18 months, Lena's life found a rhythm that felt almost normal. She completed her degree with honors, her thesis on power structures in modern criminal organizations, earning high praise from Professor Hendricks. You wrote this with unusual insight, the professor noted during their final meeting, almost like first-hand experience. Lena had smiled vaguely and changed the subject. She took over Margaret's position seamlessly when the older woman retired, managing the estate's operations with the competence and efficiency Adrian expected. The household staff respected her authority, and Adrian's business associates treated her with the careful courtesy afforded to someone in his inner circle. Her security training continued, now more advanced. Marcus taught her tactical thinking and threat assessment at levels that went beyond basic self-defense. "You're good at this," he said, after a particularly complex scenario. "Natural strategic thinking. I had a good teacher. Several, actually." The dinner parties and galas became routine. Lena navigated them with practiced ease, no longer intimidated by rooms full of dangerous people. She'd learned their language, understood their games, knew how to project exactly the right combination of intelligence and discretion. Her relationship with Adrian evolved into something that defied simple categorization. Not friendship exactly, though they shared meals and conversations several times a week. Not romance. That boundary remained firm and uncrossed. Something more like partnership, built on mutual respect and aligned interests. "You're different now," David commented one afternoon during a business strategy session. "When you first got here, you were all defensive walls and barely controlled fear. Now you're formidable. Is that good?" "It's impressive. And a little terrifying, if I'm honest." Lena took that as a compliment. On the 2-year anniversary of signing the original contract, Adrian invited her to dinner, not in the formal dining room, but on the terrace overlooking the city. "I thought we should mark the occasion," he said, pouring wine. 2 years since the night your father sold you to pay his debts. 2 years since I signed away 5 years of my freedom." Lena accepted the glass. "And 1 year since I chose to stay on my own terms." "How does it feel?" She considered the question, looking out over the glittering city below. "Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Which is strange, because a year ago I would have said that meant I'd been brainwashed or broken. And now? Now I understand that sometimes the path to freedom runs through structure. That choosing to submit to discipline and high standards isn't weakness, it's strategic transformation. She turned to him. "You knew that from the beginning, didn't you? That I needed the framework before I could rebuild." "I suspected, but you had to prove it yourself." Adrian raised his glass. "To transformation, to choosing power over victimhood, to second chances." Lena clinked her glass against his. "To becoming someone better than circumstances suggested I could be." They drank in comfortable silence, two people who'd found an unlikely partnership in the wreckage of her father's betrayal. "I received an update on Richard today," Adrian said eventually. "He's not adjusting well to prison. 3 fights in the past 6 months, multiple infractions. His parole prospects aren't looking good." Lena felt nothing. Her father had become an abstract concept, someone who existed but no longer mattered. "I stopped following the updates. It doesn't change anything." "No, but I thought you should know." "I appreciate it, but Adrian," she met his eyes, "he doesn't define me anymore. Whatever happens to him is just consequences catching up. I'm focused on what I'm building, not what he destroyed." Adrian nodded slowly. "That's exactly the right perspective." The evening stretched on, conversation flowing easily between business strategy and book recommendations and observations about the city below. When Lena finally headed to her room around midnight, she felt settled in a way she'd never experienced before. This was home now. Not the penthouse where her father had traded her away. Not some imagined future apartment where she'd be truly independent. Here, in this strange hybrid space she'd created with Adrian, part employee, part partner, entirely her own person. She opened her journal and wrote, 2 years ago, I thought freedom meant being alone. Now I understand it means being strong enough to choose your own constraints,
your own standards, your own path. I chose this, and I'd choose it again. The years that followed brought continued growth. Lena expanded her role beyond household management, gradually taking on business consulting for Adrian's legitimate enterprises. Her political science degree combined with her operational experience made her uniquely valuable for navigating regulatory challenges and strategic planning. She dated occasionally, carefully vetted men approved by security, relationships that never quite deepened into something serious. Not because Adrian prevented it, but because she'd become someone who required a specific kind of partner. Someone who understood power dynamics and strategic thinking. Someone who wouldn't be intimidated by her competence or her unusual professional situation. Those people were rare. On her 28th birthday, 5 years and 4 months after signing the original contract, Lena stood in Adrian's office reviewing the estate's quarterly reports. "Revenue is up 18%, she noted. "The restructuring of the shipping operations is paying off." "Your restructuring," Adrian corrected. "You identified the inefficiencies. You gave me the authority to fix them." Lena set down the tablet. "We make a good team." "We do." Adrian pulled an envelope from his desk drawer. "Which is why I wanted to discuss your future here." Lena's stomach tightened with unexpected anxiety. "My future?" "You've been managing household operations for 3 years, consulting on business strategy for 2. You're 28 years old with skills most people spend decades developing." He pushed the envelope across the desk. "I'm offering you a partnership in the legitimate business holdings. 20% equity, full voting rights, seat on the board." She stared at the envelope like it might bite. "You're offering me ownership?" "I'm offering you the next evolution of our arrangement. You've earned it." Adrian's expression was serious. "This isn't charity or manipulation. It's recognition that you've become genuinely invaluable to the operations. I want to lock that in formally." Lena opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a partnership agreement, drawn up by expensive lawyers, offering exactly what Adrian had described. 20% of companies worth tens of millions. "This is—" She couldn't find words. "Life-changing, I know. Take time to review it. Have your own lawyer examine the terms. Make sure you're comfortable before signing anything. You realize this is more than the settlement from the original contract would have been? The original contract was about settling your father's debt and giving you space to rebuild. This is about rewarding excellence and securing continued collaboration." Adrian stood and moved to the window, his familiar thinking position. "You could walk away now, Lena. Take the settlement. Start over somewhere else. Never look back. Or you can stay, build something extraordinary, and own a piece of the empire you've helped create. This is real? Not another test or transformation exercise? This is a legitimate business offer to someone who's proven herself invaluable." He turned to face her. "The girl your father sold 5 years ago is gone. The woman you've become deserves partnership, not employment." Lena felt tears prickling her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming weight of being seen, being valued, being offered something she'd never imagined possible. "I need to think about it," she managed. "Of course. Take whatever time you need." She spent a week reviewing the agreement with lawyers, running scenarios with David, discussing implications with Margaret. Every professional she consulted said the same thing. It was a generous offer with no hidden traps, exactly what it appeared to be. The only question was whether she wanted to tie herself to Adrian's world permanently. Because that's what partnership meant. Not a contract with an end date, but a permanent stake in everything he'd built. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, Lena found herself back in the library, surrounded by books that had become old friends. She pulled out the Maya Angelou collection Adrian had given her that first month, reading Still I Rise again. "You may write me down in history, / with your bitter, twisted lies, / you may trod me in the very dirt, / but still, like dust, I'll rise." Her father had tried to write her story. Daughter sold, daughter owned, daughter broken. But she'd written a different ending, had risen from the ashes of his betrayal and built something he'd never imagined she could. That evening, she knocked on Adrian's office door. "I've reviewed the partnership agreement," she said. "I accept." Adrian's face showed the closest thing to genuine pleasure she'd ever seen from him. "You're sure?" "Completely. You gave me a foundation when I had nothing. Now I'm choosing to build on it with you as an actual partner. Lena stepped forward and offered her hand. Thank you for seeing potential in someone everyone else saw as a victim. He shook her hand, his grip firm and warm. Thank you for exceeding every expectation and becoming someone worth partnering with. They finalized the paperwork the next day. Lena signed her name, steady and strong now, no trembling, and became a minority owner in a business empire most people didn't know existed. That night, she stood on her terrace. Not the estate's terrace, but the one attached to the private suite she'd moved into when her role evolved beyond employee. Looked out over the city that had witnessed her transformation. 5 years ago, she'd been broken, betrayed, sold like property. Now she was educated, financially secure, skilled in ways that mattered, and a partner in a powerful organization. The journey from victim to victor had been brutal, complicated, and nothing like she'd imagined. But standing here now, Lena couldn't regret it. Every challenge had forged her into someone stronger. Every restriction had taught her something valuable. Every uncomfortable moment had pushed her to grow. Her phone buzzed, a text from Cassidy. Just got engaged. Dinner next week to celebrate? Bring that mysterious boss of yours if he's as interesting as you claim. Lena smiled. She'd maintained threads of normal life throughout her transformation. Friendships, interests, connections to the world beyond Adrian's estate. Had learned to balance the extraordinary with the ordinary. She texted back, "Congratulations, I'll be there. And I'll ask Adrian, though no promises on interesting." Another text came through, this one from David. "Partnership papers are filed. Congratulations, boss." Well earned. Boss. The word felt strange and right simultaneously. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Adrian stood in the hallway, looking almost casual in dark jeans and a sweater. "Wanted to make sure you're all right," he said. "Big day." "I'm more than all right. I'm settled. Like everything has finally clicked into place." "Good." He paused, then added, "I'm proud of you, Lena, for everything you've become." The words, sparse as always from him, meant more than any grand speech. "I'm proud of me too. For the first time in my life, I'm genuinely proud of who I am." "As you should be." Adrian turned to leave, then looked back. "Your father made parole hearing next month. Thought you should know." "Will he get it?" "Unlikely, but possible." Lena considered that. 5 years ago, the thought of her father being released would have terrified her. Now she just felt mild curiosity. "Let me know if he does. I want to be prepared, but I'm not scared anymore." That's growth. After he left, Lena returned to her view of the city. Somewhere out there, her father sat in prison, paying for his choices. She'd spent years angry at him, then grieving him, then finally reaching indifference. He'd meant to destroy her. Instead, he'd set in motion a transformation that had made her stronger than she'd ever imagined possible. The irony wasn't lost on her. Over the next 2 years, Lena's partnership role expanded. She took on more strategic projects, traveled occasionally for business meetings, built a reputation in certain circles as someone who got things done with efficiency and discretion. Her relationship with Adrian remained professional but warm. They'd developed the kind of shorthand that came from years of working closely together. They challenged each other, trusted each other, functioned as genuine partners in ways that had nothing to do with the contract that had brought them together. On a crisp October morning, 7 years after that fateful night in the penthouse, Lena's phone rang with an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Is this Lena Hart?" An unfamiliar woman's voice. "Yes. Who's calling?" "I'm Dr. Sarah Chen from Westview Prison. I'm calling about your father, Richard Hart. He's been hospitalized with a severe heart attack. The prognosis isn't good. He's asking for you." The words settled like stones. Her father, dying, asking for her after 7 years of silence. "I see," Lena said carefully. "What's the timeline?" "Hours, possibly, a day at most. I understand the circumstances are complicated, but I thought you should know. Thank you for calling. I need to think about this." After hanging up, Lena sat motionless, processing. Her father was dying. The man who'd sold her, who'd tried to kidnap her back, who'd spent 5 years in prison for what he'd done to her. She felt nothing. No grief, no anger, not even satisfaction. Just a distant acknowledgement of information received. Adrian found her in her office an hour later. You look shaken. What happened? She told him about the call, watched his expression shift from neutral to concerned. What do you want to do? He asked. I don't know. Part of me thinks I should go, say goodbye, find some kind of closure. Another part knows there's nothing there, no relationship worth honoring, no words that would change anything. Then what does your gut say? Lena closed her eyes, searching for an answer. That he doesn't deserve my presence. That I don't owe him forgiveness or final words or any kind of absolution. He made his choices. I've made mine, and they don't intersect anymore. Then don't go. You don't owe him anything. But what if I regret it? What if years from now I wish I'd… Lena. Adrian's voice was gentle but firm. You've spent 7 years rebuilding yourself from what he destroyed. You don't need his deathbed blessing to validate that. You don't need closure from him because you've already created it yourself. The truth of that settled over her. She'd already said goodbye to her father in that courthouse hallway when she'd told him she wasn't his victim anymore. Anything else would just be reopening wounds that had finally healed. You're right. I'm not going. The decision felt solid, final. He asked for me, but I don't have to answer. That's my choice to make. Yes, it is. Richard Hart died 18 hours later, alone except for medical staff and a prison chaplain. Lena received the notification via official channels and felt only a distant sadness for the father who might have existed in some other life. She didn't attend the funeral, sent a simple flower arrangement with no card. Let him be buried with whatever regrets and recriminations he'd carried to the grave. Instead, she spent that day doing what she'd done every day for the past 7 years, working, building, becoming someone her mother would have been proud of. On what would have been her 30th birthday, Lena organized a charity fundraiser for young women escaping abusive family situations. She'd been planning it for months, using her position and resources to create something meaningful. The event raised over $2 million. Lena stood at the podium, looking out over a ballroom full of powerful people who'd come because she'd asked them to, and felt purpose settle into her bones. 7 years ago, she said during her speech, I was in an impossible situation. Someone gave me a chance to rebuild when most people would have written me off. Tonight, we're creating those same chances for others who deserve better than their circumstances suggest. The room erupted in applause. Beside her, Adrian nodded approval. Later, as guests mingled and celebrated, Margaret, now retired but present for the occasion, found Lena near the bar. Your mother would be so proud, she said quietly. Look at everything you've built from the ruins he left you. Thank you for everything you taught me all those years ago. You taught yourself, dear. I just provided the framework. As the evening wound down, Lena found herself on the hotel terrace with Adrian, both of them needing a break from the crowd. Good event, he said. You did well. We did well. This wouldn't have happened without your support and resources. Your vision, my resources, that's partnership. Adrian looked out over the city. You know what I realized tonight? What? That I made the right call 7 years ago, taking on your father's debt, bringing you into my world. It could have gone badly. Instead, it created something valuable for both of us. Lena smiled. Are you saying you're glad you bought me? I'm saying I'm glad you chose to stay and become a partner rather than just serving out a contract. He turned to face her. You've exceeded every expectation, Lena. Built something remarkable from circumstances that would have broken most people. I had help, good teachers, high standards to meet, structure when I needed it most. You had raw material that was worth developing. The rest was just providing the right environment for transformation. They stood in comfortable silence, two people who'd built an unusual but genuine partnership from the wreckage of one man's betrayal. I'm happy, Lena said suddenly. I don't think I've ever been able to say that before and mean it, but I am. This life, this work, this person I've become, I'm genuinely happy. Good. You've earned it. As they returned to the event, Lena caught her reflection in the glass doors. She saw a woman in her prime, confident, powerful, competent, at peace with herself. Saw someone who'd been traded like property and had transformed that violation into strength. The girl her father had sold was gone. In her place stood a woman who owned her worth, her voice, her future completely. And that, Lena thought as she stepped back into the ballroom, was the best revenge she could have asked for. Not his suffering, not his death, but her absolute, undeniable triumph. She'd risen from his ashes and built an empire of her own.